We are recording, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome out tonight to the North Ogden City Planning Commission meeting for February 15th, 2023. I'm Chairman Thomas. I'll be conducting tonight's meeting. And on that cue, we'll begin with our invocation or thought given by Commissioner Webb, followed which will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Nancaro. We'll go to that point. Commissioner Webb.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful to be gathered together as a city. We're grateful for this beautiful place that we live and all the citizens and residents that are here. We're grateful for the peace and safety that we have. Please bless us tonight that we'll be able to listen closely to one another and keep the best interest of every member of our community and the community at large in mind. These things we say in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll make note that all commissioners are in attendance tonight and just take a moment as we begin. I'd like to introduce Nisa Green. She is our new planning commissioner, replacing Alan Lunt, which is a new term. So she'll be with us for a 5-year term. Did you know that? So I'd like to turn a couple of minutes over to Commissioner Green, and she can introduce herself to us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. As stated, I'm Nisa Green. I am new to North Ogden. We're homeowners here. We moved in last summer and we're loving it so far. We chose North Ogden. It was a choice we made and we're happy we did. So no regrets there. I'm the principal of Venture Academy located in Marion Slaterville. So I'm excited to serve on this committee and help the people of North Ogden.
Thank you. We're excited to have you on board and be part of the commission. We'll begin tonight's meeting, minutes consideration for January 4th and January 18th, 2023, Planning Commission meeting minutes.
I move we approve both minutes.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any other discussion or corrections needed? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, ex parte communications or conflicts of interest to disclose tonight, commissioners. I will excuse myself for item number 6 as Jordan Park is reliant on some property that I own to be completed that subdivision.
Would you like me to
So I'll
conduct that?
excuse myself. Yes, Commissioner Mason, if you'll conduct that item.
Which item was that?
Item number 6. Anything else? All right, well, at this time, we'll open up for public comments for something that is not on the agenda. We have a couple of public hearings. You'll have opportunities to hear on those, and as normal, we do allow public comments on each items that we discuss here at the Planning Commission. So if you'd like to address the Planning Commission for something that is not on the agenda, please step up to the podium and address us at this time. Or, sorry, I forgot to mention, do we have anybody online with us, John?
No, not right now.
All right.
JD Dalpass, resident of North Ogden. I just wanted to stand and on behalf of the city council, congratulate Nisa for her appointment to the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Yes, I was part of the selection committee that went through that process and the interviews, and she really stood out to us. And so I wanted to do that. I also, on behalf of the city council, wanted to thank Alan Lunt for all of his service. I've been following along in city matters well before I was elected on the city council. And so I've watched his interaction with the Planning Commission and you guys as a body over the last several years. And I was always really impressed with him, and I thought he brought a lot of good. And so I really appreciate that and his service. So anyways, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. There's no more public comment. We'll go ahead and move to our administrative items. Our first item is item number 5, which is a site plan review 2023-04. Consideration and action on an administrative application is a site plan approval for kids under construction preschool located at approximately 1949 North, 400 East, Suite number 2. Presenter is Kai Johnson, our planning tech. Kai.
Good evening, Chair and Commission. So as stated, this is for kids under construction preschool, located in the commercial district, Southtown. This is an administrative decision, so I will read the decision statement. When the Planning Commission is acting as a land use authority, it is acting in administrative capacity and has much less discretion. Examples of administrative applications are conditional use permits, design reviews, and subdivisions. Administrative applications must be approved by the Planning Commission if the application demonstrates compliance with the approval criteria. So this is in the commercial zone, and daycares and preschools actually, we believe, were removed as part of the code update. And so that is one thing that we will have coming forward, is we'll be likely including that back into the zoning as an approved use. But currently I reviewed it as the closest approved use I could find was like a private instructional studio, and I just kind of went with that as the closest way to have this as an approved use. The parking provided on the site is shown down. If you could scroll down a little bit, John. One of the other issues that she was providing, or the applicants provided, is a site plan showing the parking on the site. It's down a little further into the application, John. It's after all of the business license application things. Here we have all the business license applications and the background checks, as well as the fire inspection report. The applicant has stated that the pickup and drop off times are staggered from 8:30 to 8:20 to 8:30 for the drop off, which is probably the busiest time at the peak hours of travel. And they have set aside 7 stalls, I believe, or is it? Yes, 9 stalls for parking here, which meets the standard, because there's only, I think, 1 classroom in this section of the building. And with the scheduled pickup and drop off, that minimizes traffic and backing up in the parking lot. The only condition of approval I would recommend is just maintain the staggered drop off and pickup times with respect to this application.
Question, you say staggered drop off, so you had wait 20 to 8:30? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, is that staggered for 10 minutes or?
Yes, she stated the drop offs are fairly quick, and so she has half of them arrive at 8:20 and then the other half arrive at 8:30.
Okay.
Any further questions?
I just had one question, reading through this, it almost sounded like the statement, like, I watched today and the parents took 7 parking spots. Is this an existing, are they already there?
They are there and they are operating.
Okay,
So this has been actually started prior to the new year. So this has
Okay.
been, we've been waiting to get some information from the applicant for some time.
sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or?
I just wanted to do a point of clarification on that. And that happens sometimes. Business license can be the trigger for how we realize that there's a site plan or some other administrative compliance requirement. So it, really no harm, no foul. They applied for their business license as they thought they should. It just turns out that in our commercial zone, these types of uses require a site plan, any change of use. And this is one of those multi-tenant commercial buildings. So they're moving from that to sort of like this other institutional type of use requires the site plan.
Thanks.
Do you have any context on why the daycares were omitted from the commercial zone?
I asked about that. I'm guessing that it was just dropped. We found a few of those changes when you're pulling 300 pages down to like 174 or something like that. have errors and omissions, so we'll put that back in. I can't find anything, John can't remember anything that was an explicit conversation about doing that for our commercial zones. So I think that we'll bring those back around and put it back in the code. Unless the planning commission feels differently. I mean, it'll
Well-
give you an opportunity to have that discussion.
Is it time for that discussion?
It's not, because we haven't noticed a zoning text amendment, so at this point, we're gonna run this as the closest similar use that we can find, which is, what's it called?
Well, here's why I asked. Because I feel like we're kind of over a barrel here. It's an administrative item, which doesn't give us any leeway to say, do we like this? Should it be there, in my opinion? Because the answer to that in my head is yes. But does it meet the code? That's an administrative item, and doesn't meet the code now is no. And so, I mean, are we violating the spirit of the law by allowing it to go under a different use? And I mean, that's, I think, what we're about to wrestle with, you know, and my only concern there, not is that should that daycare be there? Because I'm a solid yes on that. But, well, then if we start to be flexible and bend things, then what if a tire store wants to go into a residential?
Well, it's kind of more of the. Because this application came up, it was realized that it was omitted in our change of the code, reducing the code. So what the proper way to take this would be, you know, it's been applied under the label that Kai has given it. Instructional studio. So we would give approval under that. With the recommendation also that the code be corrected to include the omitted
Okay,
use.
so private instructional studio is an allowed use.
Yeah,
And it could be, then we could say this type of business is a private instructional studio. I can buy that.
and then I think what would be proper is on the approval, then just the recommendation when the correction is made to the code. Place this business license under that use. But it
Okay.
doesn't.
I was just
come back
concerned
to
over
us.
just, I don't want to cut corners procedurally and then open us up for something down the road.
What this would open us up for is somebody to appeal the administrative decision on the basis that we've applied the code incorrectly, and then they would have to question my determination of the interpretation that this is a private instructional studio. And they have a limited time frame to do that. Statute of limitations, I would say, is 30 days post decision being made. So someone's going to have to, in the next month, appeal this decision. And really what that would do, I think we would give grace to the applicant because they have a pending business license application that would just get us into the wheel of planning commission will consider putting preschools back into the code. City council will hear that. They run the risk, of course, that the council doesn't approve it, but I think it's a pretty low risk, and it was, again, I had no intention that I could see of eliminating these.
Well, we have a preschool right around the corner that's in the commercial zone.
Well, I just want to note, I'm not anti-preschool, like, don't.
No.
Okay, I'm pro procedure. Not anti-preschool.
Mason, would you consider all these kids coming to your house for the 2 weeks?
No, sorry.
Until we get this corrected.
I'm just curious.
Okay, any other discussion or questions?
I move administrative item 5B approved.
I'll think of it.
Okay, we have a motion for approval and a second. So Commissioner Barker,
Yes,
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes,
Commissioner Watson.
Yes.
Commissioner Mason.
Pro preschool, yes.
I vote yes. All right, so that item is approved. And like I said, when we get that corrected in the code, I mean, is the plan, is that needs to go back before us in recommendation?
It does, but it won't.
So if there's not a appeal to this, then let's just make sure we get it done when we thoroughly go through and what other ones we're adding, so we're not doing this every month. Oh, we missed one and we add it, and then we missed one.
And this is one of those cases where in the future, if somebody were to come back and say, I want to appeal this decision in 6 months from now or a year from now, they will have their decision, their approval now with the notice of decision. So as long as they maintain their business license, they'll operate under the rules that they got the day they were approved. But by that point, the preschools will be back in and
Yeah.
should be good to go.
All right, thank you. Well, I will excuse myself from the meeting and turn the gavel over to Commissioner Mason to handle item number 6.
Are you gonna see yourself in the room or just,
Yeah, as our rules.
okay,
We'll go.
remember, have pro
I'm
procedure.
gonna go get some custom.
Thank you.
It's not done.
It's getting closer. Getting closer.
I guess on the week there.
Okay, Kai Johnson is going to present to us administrative item 6, which is consideration and action on another administrative application, which is preliminary approval of the Jordan Park Estates subdivision located approximately 3650 North Mountain Road.
So this subdivision is in the HP2 zone. It is 38 lots. It is kind of to the southeast of the cove, directly adjacent to the cove, in fact. This is another administrative decision. I will not read the decision statement this time, though. So all of the lots meet the square footage as well as the lot frontage requirements for the zone. The main issue that will kind of arise with this is this subdivision is triggering the secondary access requirement by the Northview Fire District. That will need to be completed prior to any building permits being issued. They will need to work with the adjacent landowner to provide that secondary access. The preferred access is down to 875 East, just given that that's already in an approved subdivision that has preliminary approval. And that, sorry. Additionally, there are 2 trails that run through this development. They can be shown here on the second page of the plat. There is the trail that is the sidewalk along Mountain Road, as well as the trail that runs up at Jordan Park Circle, is what they titled it, I believe. And then they have eliminated the connection of Michelle Lane through to the lot slopes. They weren't able to get the road to meet the standards, so we eliminated that connection so that the roads wouldn't have a dangerous section of road through that area. The grades are quite steep, and they provided a cross access trail between that cul-de-sac and Michelle Lane. We have the technical review committee letters, as well as the engineer's report with their pending items that will need to be completed prior to final approval, which will be handled administratively. Are there any questions regarding this application?
So Kai, on this diagram, where would the preferred road, secondary road access be?
So up there is where the current mountain road and I believe it's Nebo that runs up the hill there.
Okay.
That is the 875 East that will connect down through North Oaks Cove, phase 17.
And then the primary access is on the bottom there, right?
The primary access will be coming, that will probably be the primary access. Currently, it's access off of Jackson Avenue or 800 East.
Which is where on here?
It's not shown. If you go to staff report, it may have enough context to see.
That's okay. I got the general idea.
I can pull up the map.
I have a question about temporary turnarounds, just because they're not located on the map. Do we have a way for cars to turn around on these stub roads then?
It's a cul-de-sac.
No, I'm talking Mountain Road though, extends and kind of goes nowhere and just does what do we call it, Michelle Way or Michelle Way?
So the fire code says if you're only 1 lot deep, you don't need a temporary cul-de-sac. And so both of these are just, this is the 1 lot, meaning a fire truck can come and make their turnaround here. And so they're able to, or that works for them. And then same thing down here, that they can do their 90 or 8-point turn or whatever it is in this intersection.
And the trash will need to do the same thing every time they come in there, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, did everyone have their questions answered? We still,
this is that map. So this is that 875 east connection. And then this is the current primary access point is coming up through here. And so the fire marshal just wanted to make sure that with Michelle Lane connecting in and Mountain Road connecting in, if this road fails, then people can still get up and around in here. Or if this road fails, then people can get up and around and out. So the idea is to have extra ways to get off the hill or up to the hill if there's an emergency.
Makes sense.
Fire code establishes the maximum number of units for that. I want to say it's in like the 60s number of units. So the cove has, since its creation, been beyond that. Determinations were made at that point, but it's at this point, just any +1 housing development up there is going to require the secondary access.
Which is good. That seems like an important safety thing.
So I didn't go through each lot with a fine tooth comb, and it passes my smell test, but we have our frontage requirements and our lot sizes all fall in line, right?
Yes.
Including lot 3 and the cul-de-sac, which looks like it. Like I said, it passes my snipper test. Want to make sure those were measured out. And
Yes, they provided the curve table on as first sheet.
okay, great. Other questions for Kai? Okay. Would our applicant care to address this?
Thank you, commissioners, for welcoming me back to North Ogden City meetings. I like that. We've been working on this for a while and have amended and changed, and I'll compliment staff on their abilities to lead us down a direction that everybody can live with. And I'll say your staff does a really good job for the city. I'm also a North Ogden resident myself, so that means a lot to me. I think a couple things maybe on the turnarounds, the cul-de-sac, because I heard the question about garbage. Garbage, we kind of talked, wouldn't go down into there because the frontage will be on the road that's active, but it'll help loop things through. And Mountain Road will actually have utilities in it, and we'll take those down to, I believe it's 1050. And so that'll help further development to the south of us as well. We look forward to this. We think it's a great parcel of property that will add to the city. I'll add that we're getting a lot of calls from people on the east side of us. They're anxious to have access to those areas, and we're working closely with them as well. I can answer any questions. I think the map is pretty straightforward, and some of those lots where we took out the section of road, those lots facing north will have beautiful walkout basements. We've been able to provide the dimensions and everything, showing that that's the slope is not beyond that. So I feel like it's really going to be a nice subdivision with some beautiful homes for the city.
Thank you for your work and being a North Ogden resident, making something that seems like it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah,
It's wonderful. When you say you've been getting a lot of calls from people from the east, east of this property or
Yes.
east of North Ogden?
I spoke today, as a matter of fact, with the gentleman that bought the Schoenberger property. And I don't know if I'm gonna be able to provide him without the Knutson property being involved access. I think he's a little bit landlocked, but he just plans on building 2 houses in that whole acreage and making it a beautiful sanctuary, if you would, for a heat family. So
Yeah.
there's good things coming, and I think it'll add a lot of good things to the area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just one last question.
Mhm.
Do you have any concerns, or has there been any discussion about snow removal in that, at the end of that cul-de-sac? Like where the
No.
snow would pile up?
There was discussion about it, but meeting the requirements of a cul-de-sac, they felt like it's something that could be managed.
Okay, thank you.
At the final plat for all of our cul-de-sacs lately, the last several years with Lauren and then Eric Casperson, we indicated snow stacking or snow storage areas so that when the building permit comes in, we avoid driveways, we avoid utilities. And then in heavy snow years like this year, we're actually dump trucks shoveling out snow from the cul-de-sacs. We've got so much snow accumulated that we're eliminating and moving it all together. Not every year is that way, but the city does make provisions for that.
Are you taking it to Pine View?
We dump it right there.
Awesome.
The other thing is we really did try to work with the developer on this one, to their credit, in a number of configurations to not add one more cul-de-sac to the city. We're, 160 plus cul-de-sacs in the city. In this particular case, if you stand at the end of Nebo and Michelle Lane, where they're going to intersect, it's a significant drop off down to that cul-de-sac and would have required like 20-foot cuts and fills in the hillside to make that road work. So, to give up 150 feet of road connectivity in kind of a minor residential subdivision and pick up a nice pedestrian access where someone from that cul-de-sac doesn't have to walk half a mile around to end up at the trail networks that the Cove has built into it, we felt like was a reasonable compromise in order to accept another cul-de-sac that high on the hill.
I can see why you're trying to keep the cul-de-sacs to a minimum. It does cause the city a lot of extra work. That being said, just looking at this, and maybe this was the logic of the developer, especially at those slopes, it's nice for kids to be able to walk down into a cul-de-sac. And, it's a different kind of connectivity than we talk about getting around the whole city, but at least locally, that's a nice attribute of that subdivision. So.
And we may have one more bad winter, because I am about ready to start my own home over here, and every year I build is record winter, so you can blame me for this.
Building, we knew that.
Thank you.
One question, should one.
Sure.
On the Northview Fire, is the only lot 106 may need sprinklers? Is that the only lot?
Yeah, that's the only one I'm aware of. And that has to do with the pressure.
Right, the pressure also location.
But I think we are going to move water lines, and it'll actually, I think, help increase the pressure, but if that,
Okay.
but they have reviewed these plans as well. In fact, we met individually with Mr. Barker.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Do we have other public comment that would care to be made on this?
Chris Pulver, North Ogden. Just the trailheads you were talking about, and on the map, it shows 6 feet, I guess. Is that different than a normal sidewalk? I guess is what I'm trying to
Yeah,
understand. Okay.
so the normal sidewalk's 4 feet.
Okay, and that's what I figured too, but, and I guess the question is, or comes down to is, Mountain Road, being the, what do we call it, feature road or something, that
Crown jewel.
crown jewel or whatever. So I mean, are they doing anything along that, or asking developers to do anything along that? Because it looks like on certain spots, going through the Cove and then extending, right now, it doesn't seem like anything special is going in or whatever. And I guess the question is, are we asking them to put benches or, any
So-
type of,
Yeah, oh, please. This has been
Yeah.
widely debated, and I'll let Mr. S take over.
So it's an 80-foot right of way. The cross section right now is on the south side or west side, depending on how that road is coming around. It's sidewalk, curb, gutter, and then you have bike lanes. And then on the north side, it's a 6-foot wide asphalt trail and in lieu of a sidewalk. So you pick up the trail on the north side and on the high side of the road. And the planning commission has made recommendations regarding whether or not to do a center planting strip in Mountain Road. The council has not yet changed the cross section to do that. So that's one issue. Then you have the pre-existing condition pieces of Mountain Road. In some cases have been extended, and other pieces you're going to end up with like disparate design. So right now, the right of way for this stretch and everything west of the Cove or north and west of the Cove will end up being a slightly different cross section. And then maybe over time, the city can look at capital projects to align those.
okay, I just been watching different plats and noticing, this just showed the trail, so. Okay,
Just for your information.
Yeah.
Said a couple years ago, we identified this swath of land as this blank canvas that we kind of had in the city, and it was going to be a main thoroughfare, and we threw everything out on the table. Should the lots be facing the road or back to the road? Much like a boulevard you'd see, what kind of landscaping, and we and everything's got a pro and a con in this world. And so feel like we've got something that works for the developer in the city, and And, I personally would like to see the Centerline Boulevard, much like Foothill Drive down in South Ogden.
Mhm.
We'll see if we get that, but
Okay, yeah, and the other question was, basically trying to understand how, does I don't know who else sees, because plats are flat. And I know we've already talked about some of the wall stuff. How do you know that, you were talking about the road couldn't connect. Do you guys see stuff in 3D or something to kind of understand how it's gonna work and not work?
Yeah, all of the roadways in a subdivision with grades like this, they're required, provide a plan and profile. So we see all the road grades, and then you don't see every single lot individually, but what you see is the amount of dirt that's gonna have to be cut and or filled to meet those road grades immediately adjacent to the roads. And when you're only one lot deep, it gives you a pretty good profile idea of what those lots are going to look like. And even right now at the flat level or at that plan and profile, they'll estimate which of these houses are gonna have basement walkout accessibility, which are gonna have, maybe height limitations or restrictions. But we did require that just because this whole entire section of the hillside is such steep slopes.
Okay, so you already know it's gonna be 11 feet on walls.
We don't know what the total wall height, not at a level, not at a lot by lot level, and there are no subdivision level retaining walls that are estimated at this point.
Okay,
But we do know, there's a few lots on there that are going to be, require more earthwork in order to develop, so we can have a pretty good guess if somebody wants a flat backyard, which of those are gonna require a big retaining wall to make it happen.
okay, cool, sorry. Education.
thank you.
Yeah.
Good question.
Any other members of the public or anybody online, John? Okay, prior to our discussion, I'd entertain a motion, give us something to talk to, pro or against this motion.
I'll make a motion that the planning commission grant preliminary approval of the Jordan Park Estates subdivision, subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report. Specifically emphasizing providing a plan for construction of a secondary access road for approval by the Northview Fire District. And prior to any building permits being issued, this access must be completed.
Second that. Okay, we have a motion to second. That doesn't mean that the item's locked in stone. Now it's time for any discussion. Anybody have any thoughts, feelings, objections? In the absence of any commentary by the planning commission, I'd call for a vote. Commissioner Watson, how do you vote? Yes. Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
and it's Commissioner Green,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Motion passes. And I'd invite Chairman Thomas back in if he's within earshot. Don't know if he is. If not, we can proceed.
Just as a reminder for the planning commission, final plat will be taken care of administratively per our new code, so city engineer, planning director, fire marshal will all be in on and review and approve that final plat.
Okay, I abdicate all powers, rights, privileges, and honors in my current role to Commissioner Thomas.
I reject that, but I'll continue to conduct the meeting. All right, legislative items. We have item number 7, annexation 2023-2, consideration and action on a legislative application to annex property located approximately 2117 North Washington Boulevard and zone the property RE20. Presenter is our planning director, Scott Hess. Scott?
Yeah, so I just want to point out, and thank you, Commissioner Nancarrow, for pointing this out in the agenda as well, that that's supposed to say R4. That's the one spot in the staff report that state is RE20. And I think I've just pulled a template from one that was a previous annexation done. They're actually requesting residential R4. The applicant, Paul Farr, as well as Candace Coons, who's helped with the application procedure, were notified of the meeting tonight. We don't have an applicant representative in the room. Just a note about,
Candace asked if I could stand in or if you had a question.
all right, Rick is here. Thank you. Just a quick primer on the annexation process. It starts at the city council level. These are areas that are within the city's annexation declaration. North Ogden, Harrisville, and Pleasant View are fortunate enough to have a real clear understanding of where we can provide municipal services and don't as far as I understand, really don't have any contested boundaries, so all the annexations we'll hear tonight are well within our annexation boundary line. The city council provides an opportunity for multiple departments of the city, as well as police, fire, water districts to weigh in on annexations, and they certify at the city council level, which kicks the application back to planning commission. So your role tonight will be to consider the request from the applicant in light of what the general plan says for the area and apply a zone to it. And that's as far as this application goes tonight. It's a recommendation to the council. Applying a zone in no way approves or permits any project in particular. They'll still have to come back in a future date for any and all subdivision site plan and everything. But knowing that once you apply a zone to it, and if the council approves it, any and all of those approved uses that are permitted in that zone that you've recommended are fair game on the site. This is a legislative decision. I'll read the legislative decision making. When the city is considering a legislative matter, the planning commission is acting as a recommending body to the city council. The city has discretion in taking legislative action. Examples of legislative actions are general plan, zoning map, and land use text amendments. Legislative actions require that the planning commission give a recommendation to the city council. Typically, the criteria for making a decision related to a legislative matter require compatibility with the general plan and the existing codes. So this 1.003 acres is being requested for residential R4. I want to point out that the applicant has been working with the property owner to the north. There's one small leftover island of unincorporated property here that's owned by the Bowden family. There's no obligation. I guess the city could potentially push for or, attempt to grab and annex that other property in, but no obligation to that property owner to bring it in. But we have requested that the site design be accommodating to development in the future, so we don't really restrict and limit development on another parcel. Another layer of this one in particular is it's being designed as a private street townhome development, but it aligns very closely with 2100 North, a public street on the east side of Washington Boulevard. UDOT being that's a state-owned, state-controlled road by UDOT, they get involved in the access agreements for this roadway. With the annexation right now with the applicant's property, it's 2 individual parcels, so they essentially have 2 driveways. The state will require them to consolidate those down into a single access, and that single access will have to be located in a minimally offset location to 2100 North. So the site design in some ways.
Clarify the 2 driveway thing.
Yeah, they've got.
Meaning a road, right?
Yeah, but right now they have, so they have 2 lots right now. If they were to develop each lot individually, UDOT can't pluck and pull that access away unless they have another, like, you got 2 accesses and then a new one comes in the middle. UDOT's not going to give them 3 accesses, and they're actually going to say, now that you have one really good primary access, your other 2 go away. So you're not going to get every 50 feet. It's just
Meaning 2050 North would be closed off,
because
because the 2100.
no. So 2050 North which one? I can't read from here. 2050 North is not the commercial site to the north, right?
No, that'd be to the south.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is 2100.
Yeah.
Failing to see the second.
Well, you
access point.
can't see it because there's 2 homes there. So John, there's one house, for the driveway. Now go north, one more north, John, that one. So there's 2 homes, 2 parcels that are owned by Paul Farr, and then there's a 3rd owner there whose house still exists.
On those driveways face Washington Boulevard, and
Yeah.
those would no longer be.
Those would go away altogether. All the structures on these sites would go away altogether, and they would come in with a new configuration. The key to note is that while the city's in the driver's seat of the land use approvals and site plan approval, UDOT has a pretty strong say in what happens with access on their roadway, on these state-owned roadways. And we, work very closely with UDOT on those and with the applicant. We started the right-of-way permit process. And this design here is preliminary that was submitted to UDOT on the right-of-way access. So it's similar to what we're going to get, so long as it meets the other underlying R4 requirements. Otherwise, this one meets the general plan. General plan shows multifamily along Washington Boulevard in this area. The surrounding properties are zoned R4. You get just a little bit further north, you have one remainder snip of commercial ground that's next to box storage, but otherwise everything here is surrounded by R4. There's a pretty significant grade change between the west side of Paul Farr's property and the single family homes to the west, which is that cul-de-sac bulb which touches it. The impacts are going to be really minimal. We're not even talking at this point about impacts of development, but there's no reason that this would be single family. They're completely separate, back-to-back projects. So staff's recommendation in this area is that this does meet the general plan. The R4 request meets the general plan, and would recommend to the planning commission that you forward a positive recommendation to city council.
And I think it's important to note that you're not recommending approval of the drawing or anything, you're just concept, right? Because the drawing hasn't been vetted through our ordinances.
But it's potentially something that could be built there, given this zone.
Yeah.
Right.
And we've asked, I think the planning commission in the past has asked for concepts to come in with these annexations. You want to know that would a project even be feasible under the underlying zoning that you've applied for? This particular site plan, I know there's some setback issues. It won't work in this exact configuration, but it's an approximation of what you can expect. And that's all I have unless there are any questions. And we have an applicant representative here.
So some questions about the configuration. I mean, it seems pretty clear that the number of units that are on there would probably exceed what was actually platted out once what's a more accurate estimate of how many units would be on that?
I don't have the total, I only have the annexation piece. I'd have to look back through the staff report and see what the math is. The residential R4 permits by zoning code up to 15 units per acre. That's on the very perfect square shaped piece of property. And so in practical reality, it's closer to somewhere like 12 to 13 units per acre by the time you do open space setbacks,
Sure.
Stormwater detention, roadways, parking, all of that. So we're looking at with this and the other piece, you might be, less than 3 acres. You're in the 30-ish units, like 25 to 30 units, probably realistically, once you get all that on the ground.
Great. Seems like some nice housing and then probably a good spot. Hard to see when, you don't see the exact configuration, but it's a good idea to see, okay, how many units are probably going to go in there and figure that out.
And this will come back to the planning commission. There's right-of-way dedication that will happen with it. So even though it's a small subdivision, it will come back to planning commission. And at minimum, you will see a site plan. So
Okay.
you'll have a chance to look at this one again, should the council accept and the annexation.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Is there anybody who would like to comment on this item in public with us tonight?
Unfortunately, you get me again. They were disappointed to see the plat come in with it because they know that's probably not what's coming. That was intended for UDOT, as was mentioned, but yeah, I think they're hoping 30 was their number to hope for. So this plat was not their intention to have it part of the submittal. So that's what I was asked to convey. So
Thank you. Understood.
thanks.
All right. We have a motion.
I move that the planning commission recommends annexation of the item listed in legislative item 7 to the city council.
I second.
With the RE4 or R4 designation instead of RE20.
Yeah, I'd like to amend my motion to include the following conditions: that property must be legally subdivided, approved, or escrowed for improvements prior to the issuance of any building permits.
Now I'll second.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I'm very interested in seeing the city annex, islands of the county that are floating around inside our city. So I'm very much in favor of annexation.
All right, Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes,
and I vote yes. All right, that positive recommendation will move on to the city council. All right, item number 8, annexation 2023-1. See, we're going backwards from 2 to 1. Consideration and action on a legislative application to annex property located approximately 1651 North and 1659 North Washington Boulevard, and zone them the property R4 and M1. Presenter is Scott Hess. Scott?
Thank you. And I don't know, John, if you want to recommend on how to do this one, but this particular application, the annexation is hinging on the next 2 applications. That's why we ordered them in this way, is because everything else in the packet we'll talk about tonight is on the same application, same properties, but if we recommend this, for instance, if we recommend this forward as the request is made, it will require and necessitate a general plan amendment. If we require and necessitate a general plan amendment and want this request is moved forward, it will require a zoning text amendment. So all of these pieces are stacked. It's kind of up to planning commission chair and maybe our city attorney to help us guide the decision making on this. But if you want to talk through each of the pieces and then run through your recommendations, the planning commission is in a legislative body, like legislative position here, so you're making recommendations to city council on any and all of this. But just wanted to clarify that approval and or denial of one kind of like stacks the decisions as they run down the line.
So the only thing probably we need to do legally is hold 2 separate public hearings for the 2 separate items. Right, so that would be the only probably procedural thing that you need to do separate. And each motion individually, but you could talk about it all as one lump sum and do all the motions at the end.
To me, the most simple, straightforward one is the annexation. Again, as we just heard, it's something that's generally favorable.
Well, in this one, they're asking for a zone designation on the annexation, so if that's contingent on changing the general plan and adding some zoning amendments. Or do we want to discuss those before the annexation, or annex it without the zone? The zone be
Or do you
assigned
want to
later.
just run through the information on each of them and you can ask questions? And we'll hold
Yeah, we'll just kind of have, let's do all that.
Okay.
It's worth noting that the public hearing requirement for annexations that don't have this particular like procedural issue are all held at the city council level. So that's why you didn't have a public hearing specifically for Paul Fars, is that's already taken care of in state code through the annexation portion. So this one we won't have a public hearing for, but we will on the next item.
So before you start, Scott, let me just, so we're on the record, I'll read all 3 items that we're going to be discussing. So as mentioned, item number 8 will also in this discussion, so it'll kind of, they'll wash through each other. Item number 9, which is general plan text amendment 2023-1, which will be holding a public hearing for consideration and recommendation on the legislative application to amend the general plan to permit manufacturing uses within the Southtown neighborhood near approximately 1651 North and 1659 North Washington Boulevard. We'll also be discussing item number 10, which is zone text amendment 2023-1, public hearing and consideration and recommendation on legislative amendment to update Title 11, Section 10, Article B, manufacturing zone to permit storage units as a permitted use. We'll have 2 separate public hearings for these items, but through the explanation from our planning director and discussion, they'll kind of all be discussed together. Scott?
Thank you. Annexation request with applicants Terry Severing. This is 9.45 acres between 2 parcels currently in Weber County unincorporated. right at the corner of 1700 North and Washington Boulevard and running along 1700 North. The request, as we've seen about 7 months ago last summer in a concept plan, is for a multifamily, a portion of this project to go multifamily, a portion of this project to go climate controlled storage units, and then just standard storage units. So I think that's kind of two-piece project for the storage unit component. Right now, North Ogden City Code in the manufacturing zone is the one place that storage units were allowed, and they're allowed to be upgraded in place, but they're not allowed by right anymore in the manufacturing zone. For the annexation component, this particular area of the city in the general plan, future land use map rewrite 2021 and 2022 is slated for a mix of uses, including commercial and multifamily housing. So the R4 piece, staff, it's uncontested, it meets the general plan, it meets the recommendations there. It's the storage unit piece that makes this a little bit more complicated, a little bit more difficult to tackle. Talking to the applicant and a handful of departments in the city, we could accommodate those storage units in a number of ways. You could carve out requirements in the R4 zone to permit storage units. You could carve them out in the commercial zone. We felt like the most reasonable, the easiest way to do this was to take the class 1 storage regulations for upgrades and just apply those in the manufacturing zone and create a permitted use, essentially reopen the manufacturing zone up for new storage units. That puts the city at the least amount of risk, in my opinion, because we don't have any more land in the city zone for manufacturing that isn't already completely covered. But by permitting that, any future user of, owner of property or applicant would get the same rights and, rules at that time to request a rezone of manufacturing, which would then create the ability that they could create new storage units. Staff has, I have my opinion on this. I will reiterate that I talked about it 7 months ago. I think it's a great project. It's just in a problematic location for the city for future growth and use. 1700 is our only stoplight that we have between 1700 and 2550. It's possible in the future we may get one more, but that's really land use dependent. So that corner has a lot of high economic value for different commercial uses. They're really, they're clearly not beating down the door of the property owner, or they would bring that highest and best use. But as the planner who gets to sit in this seat and shepherd the city along for however long you guys will have me in this position, I've got to look, not at today's issue, but for 20 years, or 25 years down the line. And storage units are one of those uses that hit the ground and they don't go away. They're typically viable. You maintain them and they're an excellent use and they stay. So working with the applicant, we looked at different ways to entitle this. I think the clearest way was have a conversation with the Planning Commission, City Council about opening the general plan designation up in this area for more uses to include manufacturing. And then if that's the desire, then amend that manufacturing use, and then just, every individual rezone going forward, they would just have to look at those legislative items as they move forward. So staff has a soft approval, an approval recommendation for the annexation on the R4 at this time, knowing that there's some other, things with culinary water and stuff that we're working on. But the manufacturing component, my recommendation is that at least right now, it doesn't represent the highest and best use for the long term in the city, and for the Planning Commission to consider that information, speak with the applicant, and then formulate and make a recommendation for the City Council.
Can I understand I thought when we annexed a property like this, I guess I may have had this wrong, that the entire parcel had to come in one zone. Is that not? That's obviously not the case, because this is being recommended to be an R4 and an M1.
Yeah.
Did we look, or was there any discussion in your discussions about commercial right on the corner of 17 and?
Not anything beyond what we had discussed in this meeting 7 months ago. So we could complicate it even further that way. What would happen is between this recommendation of the split zoning And approval of the annexation approval would come with a subdivision requirement, like some form of development agreement, or the notice of decision would say you'll have to subdivide it. Because we don't split zone pieces of property, but as it is right now, it's already 2 parcels. It's going to have to be subdivided, so that's a known, like a known that will come in the future. So we would the annexation would be approved subject to the subdivision in the future. So they don't have to do that first, and they don't have to bring their subdivision requirements. Like the applicant could have brought the full package, the full subdivision submittal, everything. This is a more reasonable way to go, to not spend thousands of dollars up front on something that has a pretty high, consideration level.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So the graphic that we're looking at, can I get some clarification, John, on what is being proposed as M1 versus R4?
So there would be a line somewhere in this area of the property, with the front being M1 and the back being R4 is what's being proposed.
So the storage would be on the Washington Boulevard. Well, that's different than the last time we looked at it.
And last one, we have a reverse from that.
I think the reason for that, well, I can't tell you the reason for that, but if I guess, did you?
Well, I was gonna say, I think the last proposal you saw was an internal storage building out here
Correct.
that mimics a commercial.
Mm.
And that was like the
Yeah,
keystone feature of
yeah.
yeah.
So it wasn't, and that's probably, I mean, the applicant is here, but I imagine that still is what would be proposed
Mm.
with traditional storage here, and then townhomes or something that meets the R4 in the back. Sorry, my
Yeah,
monitor's annoying.
That drawing was on, if you scroll down, John, it's on part of the,
Yeah,
right.
Well, that's
there.
a
Right,
sample.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you had meant the pictures of the sample building.
That's what was brought in, the sample
Yeah.
buildings.
And I've been
last
paying
time.
attention to these since, I had no idea they existed. And I've seen them now around, and your eyes kind of, this isn't discussion, so I'll maybe stay quiet for a minute.
And what I've seen around like through Syracuse and that has them, and pretty nice looking building.
All right, anything else any questions for Scott, or we'll have each of these public hearings and go
I
through the
remember
proper
I
process.
on Washington had the building there that was connected and not distracting from the Washington Boulevard.
So as we've had this explained to us with Scott, then let's look at, well, does it seem to make most sense to say, do we allow storage units as a permitted use in the manufacturing zone? Is that our step 1 to talk about? And then step 2 would be, if so, would this be a manufacturing zone?
Well, we
I
don't.
mean, we're not saying, we don't have an application for storage units. So,
yeah.
And we don't have an overwhelming number of public here at this point for public hearings. You may just want to open and hold the public hearings. I mean, that's your call, but then at least that part has been completed. And if there's no other, like, if all you're doing right now is fact finding for all of the items from the commission, then you want to tackle these individually. You'll at least have had.
well, let's do that, Scott. Good recommendation.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and open the public hearing, this first public.
Do we need to hear from the applicant prior to the public hearing? Is there any requirement or anything like that?
We usually let them speak first,
As
but
part of the public
as part of the
hearing.
public hearing, yeah.
Okay, thanks, sorry to catch up.
So let's go ahead and open the public hearing for the general plan text amendment 2023-1 legislative application to amend the general plan to permit manufacturing uses within the Southtown neighborhood near approximately 1651 North and 1659 North Washington Boulevard. At this time, the public hearing is now open. We invite first the applicant to come and speak, and any of those after to speak to the planning commission at this time.
Thank you. I'm Terry Severine. I'm the owner of this project. Yeah, this is kind of what when I first originally come in to talk about the storage units, which was 19, I was looking at general storage units all the way through. to the recommendation, they were looking at more of a concept of a gateway building, from what I remember called. They want it on the corner, and that's where I come up with this concept for this building, because I thought it was a very nice looking, looks to me more like a business office than it does a storage unit. And I really like that building. I think it would look really nice there. And then the conventional. To kind of clarify a little bit, yeah, you're going back, there's a road that is on your plan that's going through the middle of the property at about 1,000 feet off of Washington. And so you'll have that road go through all the most of the townhomes will be on the west side of that road. And I'm gonna was planning on putting a few on the east side, as you can see. Let's see, yeah, right here, some townhomes here, there's the road, and then townhomes down there, and then this would be the what I call conventional storage units with the building up on Washington. Any other questions that I can answer?
Now, if I remember on the conventional storage units, the fence around quite pretty.
Yeah, what I want to do is use the back side of my storage unit buildings as a wall. So you'll see a nice brick block wall all the way around.
Okay.
So that you won't see into those, because one of the one of the comments was made that they're an eyesore when you look in and see the doors and everybody open. No, I want to put a block wall that you cannot see in, for not only for security for my tenants, but to look aesthetically pleasing on the outside as well.
Okay.
And I did have, I don't know if they've still got them or not, but I've had a couple of different pictures that show different ones that I've seen throughout. It's kind of like what you'd see where you're going down 2700 and you got the block walls on each side. You know, there's that corridor right there to kind of soften the noise for the homeowners. This is going to be the same thing, and it only come down to about probably, well, you're at 1,000 foot for the road, cut back for the store townhomes, so probably around 850, 900 feet long. Well, it wouldn't be that long because I'd have the building on the front corner that's going to take up some room. So you just have a like 600-700 foot length of wall along that corridor. That would be nice looking. Plus I do some landscaping along there and stuff like that as well. I want to make it look nice as well as provide security for the tenants. Trying to make it as nice looking as I could possibly make it.
Yeah, it brings up a question on the outside, if you're going to put landscaping on there, would you still be the one to take care of that landscaping?
You bet.
Okay.
Yeah. And it could be either xeriscape or whatever, just something that looks nice along there. I think we've even got, I think there's some actually showing some trees or something.
Yeah.
I would dress that up, make it, and keep that nice and clean, as long as I can keep the people from throwing all the garbage around. The part I got down there now. So, any other questions I can answer for you?
So on that front building, has any consideration been given, and I haven't necessarily seen this, but maybe it could be a thing, but the first floor being maybe mentioned like it will look like an office building, but perhaps office space or retail, and then the upstairs is the climate controlled storage?
Yeah, Scott and I have talked about that. We've and JD as well. We've talked about they've suggested to me. Part of the problem I have with that is if you go around your city now, there's quite a few vacant strip malls now. The people are not banging down the doors trying to get in. And so I'm kind of hesitant to, I mean, if that's a breaking point, I will figure out how to put some strip malls in there to do that. But at this point, I kind of feel like it's overkill. I'm putting a lot of money in for those spots, or a few spots in there to do that. A vacant space.
Yeah.
And that's my problem. And, you know, as I've talked to Scott and JD about it, and we were kind of waiting on a business development plan that was supposed to go through, and evidently that's been struggling getting that done, that the city is doing as well, to see if the business is supported or not, you know, enough or not enough or whatever, but that just hasn't come to fruition. But I'm just trying to get my wheels spinning again and try and get where I can with that. Original plans, the whole piece was going to be storage units, but then I thought, you know, that's a lot. And so that's why I chopped it up, went residential and that type of a thing. And like I said, I tried to pick as nice a looking building
as I could pick to go on that front corner. I know it's not a retail front as much, you know. But I think it's a nice looking building, in my opinion. But I'm biased.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, I have one more question.
Sure.
So I appreciate all the thought and consideration that you've put into this project since we first discussed it. But it isn't currently in the general plan. So I guess my basic question is if we were just looking at this for an R4, would you still want to proceed with the annexation?
I had the same,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna answer for you, but I had the same question in my head and I was tempted to ask that. And then I thought, it's really, we're only making a recommending body in this. And so I would suggest
Right.
that our recommendations still probably carry through and then he can choose to take it or not to this.
Well, this was gonna be my business that I was gonna run to going forward, future wise. And so really, it's kind of a,
Contingent.
yeah, it's kind of a package deal because that's my future. Because my other business that I run in, I own A1 Key Service right now, and it's kind of slowly dwindling out. In fact, I sold my building because I wasn't getting enough business internally to keep it going. And so now I'm focusing on this because that's where my future.
Well, I would probably not give them us a hard no on that, just because.
It's not a
Well-
hard no, but it's a,
Well, so I understand it's a package deal, I understand all that, but we don't have the final say on this.
Sure.
We are as a recommending, I just want to let you be clear on what's happening here. We're a recommending body, and so
right.
any recommendation, if we recommend 2 of the 3, if we're at 2 on, hey, yeah, you should be annexed, and yeah, that should be an M1 zone, but no, storage units shouldn't be allowed in there. Those are all recommendations, and so
Sure.
I would suggest that you still have another recourse.
I do have a backup plan.
No, I'm saying you have another level
Yes.
of recourse, which is the city council still.
Right,
So our recommendations go there.
yeah,
This isn't the end of the road.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just,
no.
it may make a difference in my own consideration. of
Right.
the big picture.
I would, me and my contractor have talked to this extensively. If it does come down, it's not what I want to do because like I told you, that's my future. But we have to change the zoning to a commercial to allow whatever I can put on the front storage. Like we said, I've had developers come and looking at it as far as doing the residential, but I have not had I haven't had anybody come and say, hey, we're gonna give you money because we want to put a 7-Eleven there.
Right.
We did years ago, but the guy backed out on it at the last minute. And I haven't really had anybody hit me up. I've had a lot of developers trying to do for as far as the residential, but then they're not looking at the commercial end of it. And that's why I'm still trying to stay with what I would like to build. Because I think of the value to the city with all the apartments going over everywhere, they've got to have places to put their stuff. And both Bach and the other one, they're booked.
Yeah.
And every storage unit they're around that I've talked to, they're 95 to 98% full. And so that's why I feel that this would be a good place for it with, like I said, you've got the townhomes going in or apartments going in each down the road to the southeast, plus you've got all those that are supposed to be coming through on the north side, plus all the townhomes there. And I just think it's a good fit. I really do. I think it's a benefit to the city.
As a clarification, I mean, it seems to me that as a business owner,
Mhm.
you're trying to figure out something that will work for you, work for the city and work for the city.
Yes.
And you're looking at this saying, hey, I had a few plans, but storage units are gonna be profitable. There's a need. I'd like to spend some of that extra money on making something that's a nice gateway
Yeah.
in North Ogden. That's family land that you've had for a long time.
Yes.
And then the back end seems like it provides some housing.
Right.
Is there anything along those lines that you'd like to further clarify with us? Because I really appreciate your transparency, even saying, hey, with my, contractor, we've got backup plans here, but really I've got to consider this and saying like, what am I going to do for my livelihood?
Right.
And that's I really appreciate that transparency. You're trying to show us something that will work for you and potentially work for the city. So any further clarification you think that would enlighten us on along those lines?
I don't really want to, if you're talking to me as what I would really like to see there, this has really been my go from, like I said, back to 2019.
Sure.
I thought about a convenience store, but to me, they're an eyesore on, I mean,
Sure.
they're not that nice looking. I just,
I
but I
agree.
just, this building, you know, when Brandon mentioned the very first time I met with you guys, he says, I really don't want you on Washington.
Yeah.
You know, and my original plan was to stay off of Washington and build complete storage units all the way to the west.
Yep.
And then as time went on and I found out that the road had to go through and split right down the middle of it, I went, well, I
Yeah.
can make that work. And then I started thinking about, well, he wants some nice looking building.
Yep.
As people are coming into Washington Boulevard. So then I started thinking this kind of a concept.
Yeah.
And I looked at a lot of different buildings and this one come up and I went, that would look just awesome
Yeah.
right there. And so I've really tried to plan with the city and try to work as best I can. And, you know, if I have to figure out how to put strip malls in the bottom of it, part of them in the bottom of that,
Sure.
I'm not against it. I
Sure.
just, like I said, I've just looked around and what I've seen, you know, a lot of vacant places already. It just scares me a little bit. You
Yeah,
know what
no,
I mean?
I
I mean,
that's-
10 years down the road, who knows?
Sure.
You know, but you don't have a whole lot of businesses really banging the doors down to come into North Ogden.
Yeah.
I've seen that for all the years I've been known about, you know, I grew up in North Ogden. And I've seen that business come and go on
Yep.
a regular basis here. Which is sad because you've got a good, you know, city.
Yep.
But for whatever reasons, the businesses don't support real well.
Yeah.
You know, there's only been a handful of them that really stuck out for years and years.
Sure.
And so that's the only thing that concerns me about spending that money to put in there, and it's not, you know, I don't know how that's gonna affect even the parking situation, because if storage unit right now, I would really need a whole lot of parking.
Yeah.
But when I start putting a strip mall, then that's gonna add, it's gonna cut me back, I'm gonna have to step back further, or,
Sure.
you know, make a lot of changes that I'd be willing to do if I have to.
Sure.
But I just, for the money and the square footage on that,
Yeah.
it scares me.
Yep. Yep. I hear you. It sounds like your moneymaker's is storage units.
It is,
And so you're really open to something that, but you have opinions, it's your land.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe a little bit of a sticking point is that the city's like, well, what about the future? And, you know, I think anyway, I really appreciate the discussion because it gives me clarity without making too many assumptions
right,
as to where you're at.
right.
So,
Yeah, no, I've tried to be as open about this whole project as I could possibly be, and
which is great. You know,
Yeah.
people usually end up with a better product.
like I said in the beginning, I grew up here in North Ogden, you know, from a kid, and I, you know, if I could find a place to live here and give me 5 acres other than down there. Biggest problem, but what pushed that was the fact that I got 6 other brothers and sisters involved in that
Yeah.
want their money out of it.
Sure.
And so for me to spend buy that ground is, I can't afford that.
Well, I used
That's what this
to
is.
used to ride Lamar Taylor's horses up 2100.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
I've taken horses up that road plenty of times.
Yeah,
When I was,
exactly,
you know, the
yeah.
early 80s.
And so this was my future endeavor to retire my business and move into this and head forward. And that's where, you know, where I've been trying to get to so far.
Yeah. Well,
I
thank
know there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I ran into the hurdle in the beginning of, there was a moratorium on storage units. And I think I got that stirred up to where the city started thinking about, said, hey, we need to retain stuff to control the storage units.
Yeah.
In here.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, I don't know, I'm biased because I think it'd be a perfect fit right there. I
Sure.
really do.
Sure. I hear you. Thank you for sharing
You
that.
bet. Thank you. Anything else?
Thank you. All right, we have any other public?
Eric, just to clarify, you opened the general plan text amendment public hearing, right?
Yes.
That's-
Item number 9. Should we allow manufacturing in the Southtown neighborhood?
Chris Pulver, North Ogden. I guess the only thought I was just thinking, I think, I don't know, it was in the report or someplace I was reading so M1, basically, you're looking to, in the city planning, you're pushing businesses to provide sales tax. Is that the true thing for it, really? I mean, honestly, that was the one thing I was thinking about. I mean, I understand the concept of printing money, which is storage units, because everybody doesn't want to get rid of their stuff, but I think the biggest thing in aesthetics, I think they're spot on, but I think the biggest hand wringing is the sales tax, because that's what's gonna generate more revenue, not just the property tax, so. That was it. I didn't think I had anything issues with it.
Mr.
It was
Polk,
just
your
the
point
fact-
is that it would provide minimum amounts of.
Right, yeah, to be in that sector on that, I think Scott said, the gold of that corner. That's the thing you're trading off.
That's
So,
I
But you're gonna have something developed there, you're gonna have people living there and help all your other statistics and stuff like that, but. That block will probably always be that sort of unit, and on the other side, you have what, apartments and doctor's office and everything on the other corner, so.
So I'm gonna ask some clarifying questions, so are you of the opinion that there is a better use of the land than the storage unit from that perspective? From that perspective.
I mean, right now, you're gonna.
I'm sorry to hold you to that, but
No, I think the biggest thing is that you're gonna get revenue, but not. Maybe what you could in 15 years, but you're gonna get it now. I think, going through all the audit stuff, and I've been digging at the budget, and. That's where you're gonna get a driver, is not so much the property tax, but the sales tax, but. If you can't get anybody there, then he's your man, so anyway.
That's the question mark. That's playing, that's a gambling game.
Yeah, because I remember the 7-Eleven thing, and that kind of disappeared, but yeah, I mean, that's the key thing, is if you can't get anybody.
Are we ever going to be a destination city that's going to provide places where businesses to exist?
Right. But anyway, that was it.
excellent point.
Thank you. We have anybody online, John?
No,
Take a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Let's go ahead, since we're blending all this together. We'll now open our public hearing for zone text amendment 2023-1, consideration and recommendation on legislative amendment to update Title 11, Section 10, Article B, manufacturing zone M1 to permit storage units as a permitted use. Public hearing is now open. Anybody would like to address this? Whether we make storage units a permitted use in manufacturing zone? Up through all that. All right, we have no public. We'll
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, discussion. These kind of, as they kind of go all together. One, let's kind of narrow in, not so much on the storage units, but the manufacturing zone. Or I guess, should we allow storage units in manufacturing?
I think it's a good place to start.
Let's talk about that.
I'm having a hard time separating the two out.
Well, no, but just remember, anywhere we put manufacturing, storage units become a permitted use. They aren't currently. We do have, there's some ground west of the current storage units in our city that's, I wouldn't say it's vacant, but it's large parcels with a home or a garage on them that could be come in as I think at least the Marsh property down there to the west, that's still in M1, isn't it?
That's all. But all that stuff west of Dan Nixon's projects, all RE20.
As soon as it go from him, it switches to RE20. Oh, I thought M1 went a little bit further.
That is one area of the city that would be future potential, I think a future potential risk. And it's not necessarily risk, but that's a viable place that you might start to see M1 march one direction. But right now, everything that's MP1 is essentially fully developed.
Does the future map show any expansion of M1? So as a permitted use storage units, we've talked about this, in my opinion, is it's so hard to just give a blanket permitted use to something that we're
Can't control.
trying to have so site specific.
I agree.
And so I don't know if there's a different way to, to look at that. I know that's kind of what drove it to where it's at now. Is taken off and then the expansion of that and saying, well, if somebody wants to do it, they'll go through the process. And then that gets more specific to say, hey, where would you like to?
Since we
So-
have so few places that are potentially risky, I think keeping it as is and handling it one at a time, specifically for that other property, because I'm coming around a little bit to this one, whereas that one, I'd be like, I don't want to see, I don't want to go down that road. That doesn't seem like a good thing.
So I'll comment on that specific corner in a minute, but as far as the use of the land, should storage units be permitted, I think there's a market for them and I would hate to see our city just thumb our nose at that whole use, that whole business model. I'd rather us see, okay, what are the specific things about it we don't like? Is it the look or the feel or the noise or the lights or whatever, and legislate that. And so, given that I'm not in favor of, just blanketly saying no to this use, I think the manufacturing zone is the right place because I think it fits more closely in line with that, with manufacturing than it does residential or commercial or things like that, because of the way the land is used. So I'm in favor of that. Now whether that's a right for this corner is something I'll talk about in a second.
So
For that point, I'm in favor.
So if somebody asks for a manufacturing zone with the idea of doing storage units, and then it doesn't pencil quite right, but the property's been rezoned. So then
But then what
some
about,
other manufacturing business goes there.
but
Yeah,
what about manufacturing would work?
Vice
What-
versa.
Let's take this corner then. What manufacturing would you allow there? Would you put a dog food factory there? Would you put a lumber mill there? You'd say no for the same reasons. I think.
So that's the question is,
Yeah,
but go further back, like Southtown, this essentially is property all the way to 1500 north
Mhm.
and west to Harrisville border, which we have houses and a church right on the border, and then it's vacant ground
Right.
other than the houses along Washington. So that whole area, you say, somewhere in there, would you say, let's allow manufacturing, not just this piece?
Yeah, but that's,
And that whatever things are allowed in manufacturing, you say, well, no, I'd allow storage units back there, but I don't want any other manufacturing. And if that's the case, then this manufacturing zone may not be the right zone for
That's right.
storage units.
yep.
Is the question is essentially is storage units and manufacturing that zone, or is it almost like, you know what? As sad as is, we make a self-storage zone. And then it's by itself. Then you don't get the, flip
build
of saying,
Yep.
hey, we zone this manufacturing, we decided manufacturing isn't going so well, and we're gonna convert these 4 buildings of our self-storage complex into welding.
well, I think
factory.
manufacturing shares a lot of commonality with storage, noise, traffic, the time of day it's used, those kind of things. And so
Speaking of similarities and differences, can we clarify, I'm not quite sure on this, is there a funding difference for the city between, common manufacturing uses versus storage units in particular? Is there any difference there? I don't know if anyone can speak to.
Property taxes are collected based on valuations of the structures. So
Okay.
manufacturing structures may have higher valuations. It isn't necessarily the planning commission's role to be, to think specifically land uses per their impacts on our long-term budget,
Okay.
but it's also not your role.
Right, just curious, as we're discussing the differences between these
That's
entities.
use of land.
So one thought that I had as you're discussing this is, the lodge is an example of a rezone that was contingent upon a very specific narrow use. So the rezone from, commercial C2 to R4 at that time when the lodge was built back in 2014 came with the requirement that the rezone is only applicable if this is used as assisted living. Should it not be used as assisted living, the property reverts back to the other use. So that's one way that you could allow it to be manufacturing, but not the full open allowances of anything and all things manufacturing. It would be, potentially permission to be M1 for Class A self-storage. If it's not Class A self-storage, it reverts back to, and then call it commercial. Or the applicant has an opportunity to come back.
So that's a good point in the Southtown. If we're addressing it specifically for something like this, then we would say manufacturing zone in the Southtown would be allowed for specific uses. And we list the uses versus if we just put,
Man.
and right now, if we're saying, hey, permitted use of self-storage in manufacturing zone, anywhere in the city that's manufacturing would now get a license to do self-storage.
Yeah, that's,
But is a very small area in town, which is mostly already built as self-storage.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that negatively affects us there. I mean, we're talking a pretty small area. There's, John's got it up there on the map.
There's two spots. Self-storage, self-storage.
And that's it.
That's all the manufacturing in the city currently.
So from that standpoint, we're not really gonna get a gotcha if we allowed it in manufacturing, because somebody would have to rezone to manufacturing to get it.
I think it's worth
So-
mentioning, sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
When I get a thought, it just has to come out. But we had those two things built, and something about that triggered a decision by some past legislative body here to disallow storage units after that. Something about that was found to be not wanted in the city, right? It was distasteful enough to someone that those storage units triggered, I believe, the removal of them from being a permitted use in our city.
I don't know that this is the reason, but logic would tell me the fact that when you drive down Washington Boulevard and you look up there, you see that's what it is.
I think they're hidden. I think they're well hidden.
Compared to other.
They are well hidden compared to other ones, but I don't know that the highest best use of Washington Boulevard is that. And I think people were like, well, how do we address that? Because that was a mistake
Mhm.
in that spot.
And how do we prevent that? from
That's what I wanted,
continuing?
that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
To be the point I was trying to make, is somebody at some point felt
So-
like this wasn't.
Said this is a
good reason.
mistake. We should have never allowed that in
And
this
this is how
spot.
we're gonna control the future.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that they were correct or incorrect, but somebody made that determination.
because pragmatically speaking, I don't think anyone would look at that and say, oh, that's the highest best use of our land here in North Ogden for storage units in that exact place. They are well
On
hidden.
Washington.
They did the best that they could with it. They followed the rule. They made it profitable for them and they're used. We need
That's
to-
it. As the city grows, we need X number of everything, right?
Yeah.
Do we need more ice cream stores? And that comes up there all the time. You don't need any more ice cream stores. You have so many. Well, if they're being used and the city's growing, then we need one more someday.
Yeah.
You know, and that way I'd say the same thing about storage units. As the city grows, the number of storage units we're gonna need, we're gonna.
I agree with you, other than it is not the city's responsibility to provide services of every
Correct.
type to
That's
its
right.
residents.
Correct.
That's right.
You know, we
That's
need a
correct.
train station. Well, the city's gonna grow. Let's put a train station in.
Yeah,
That's
right?
correct.
So,
I should, I just shouldn't say need, I should say demand.
but,
Well, it's-
but it is. I mean, that is a service that just like as residential units grow and increase, right behind it is self-storage because, you know,
Yeah.
everybody's got too much stuff.
I think it's better.
Right now, the need right now is what? We've got all these townhomes, all these apartments going in, there's a need for a storage unit now or 15 years down the road. Right now, I know there's people need them and they're not there, so what are they going to do with their stuff that's laying around their yard, they're hanging over the balconies?
Well, people need affordable housing right now too, but
Yeah, but nobody's defined that yet either.
Yeah.
Some of us need
There's
ice
no
cream stores.
definition of affordable housing either.
it took me 20 minutes to get my dinner. We need another restaurant. I only got my drink because I'll come to the.
The task at hand, do we feel like many storage units in the.
So item number 10, yes, there are storage units. Should that be a permitted use in the M1 zone? I mean, it's the zoning change. It doesn't hurt us. So it's kind of a. If we're gonna allow storage units, that's the question. Where should they be? I think we've decided manufacturing zone is that. So we say yes to storage units and put them in manufacturing or just,
I
yeah,
thought,
or.
I guess the question is, what zone do we put in, we have the most control over what happens?
Yeah.
We already have the standards in the M1 zone for the
Yeah.
upgrades. So the
Yeah.
standards it'd be reasonable to apply the upgrade standards to those that are new. And it would require some redlining. We'd have to change some text and language, but we've already gone through the process of what do we want upgraded ones to look like? So it seems to be reasonable
Yeah.
that that's what we would want brand new ones coming out of the ground to adhere to.
Yep.
Hmm.
Well, another thing that we're not talking about is that, we've already had a proposal with Lock It Up Storage about how they want to improve. And as far as I'm aware, those plans continue to kind of roll forward a little bit. So there's, there are things happening even near here that will, tumble, not necessarily contingent. I do think, at risk of extending the evening a little bit here, I do think something that Brandon was bringing up is important, and it's our responsibility. It is our responsibility as a body to look at future planning. We've been trained that way, like we need to spend time doing that. And I think by taking some of the stuff that staff has taken off our plate, it gives us a chance to like pragmatically speak even about specific swaths of land here and figure out how we do stuff going forward. And so I think Brandon was trying to verbalize like, hey, what about this? What about that? So I think the discussion is good. And I think it's time well spent, even though sometimes we get into these discussions and we all get scared, like, oh my gosh, it's going to take forever.
That brings up a good point, and the building he's proposing there in Washington and the land that's just south of that, that building looks pretty attractive. And I'll tell you, it would distract from businesses want to go next to it. It's not some of it doesn't look downgrade, it's very clean, upbeat, and other businesses may more willing to go right next to it.
Yeah. I think what we do have is we have an applicant who's expressed flexibility and willingness to what would be on the frontage. I think, and as I thought about it since the summer, as I've driven past and looked at it, I thought, would I rather see that building there or would I rather see a gas station? And I think to me, the thing that is really at issue is the light. The stoplight is it makes it hard because the stoplight is a really valuable thing for the city, but my gut tells me I'd rather see a building like that than a gas station with cars coming and going and trash. Like that's a better barrier coming into North Ogden. I like it. I like a clean parking lot. It's probably not going to get used a ton and it's going to stay blackish. It's going to look nice.
I had a lot of respect for the vision of Brent Taylor, and he was very passionate about this area as it was a gateway into the city. And he felt like North Ogden this is, if I can speak for the dead here, he felt like North Ogden was a beautiful city, which was ill representative itself as you drive into the city.
Yeah.
And he really wanted to see something gateway there. So, and I agree with that vision. I would love to see that as well.
And we have an applicant who has expressed flexibility when it comes to that. And I really appreciate the candor in which she said some of that stuff, because I think we keep working, whether it's this or something else, we'll probably end up with something better there than we would if we just, didn't have that transparency.
Chairman
Let's-
Thomas, are you prepared to take?
Yeah, let's
motions
take a
that
motion
keep-
on item number 10.
Okay, and on item number 10, sorry. I cut
We
you
got
off.
an open public hearing right now, right?
No, we've closed.
Yeah.
Oh, did we?
I'm prepared to make a motion on item number 10 and item number 10 only if you choose to
Okay.
chew it up this way. I would move that we recommend to the city council that item number 10 be adopted, that storage units be permitted as use in the manufacturing M1 zone.
I'll second that.
Right. I would recommend adding that by reason that our controlling of storage units can be the way the city is now controlled by the zoning process. Because the only two manufacturing zones are built out.
Would you like to see an amendment to that motion?
Yeah, just so the council understands why that positive,
Okay,
what we've talked
so
about.
I'd like to amend that motion to include, that is where I need your help with the verbiage.
I
That.
can't remember what I said. That the controlling of storage unit development would be handled by the zoning process. Being that the city only has two current M1 zones and they're occupied by storage units, self-storage facilities.
So that can include that language in my amended motion.
So that's what you're going with now, Brandon? Okay, I'll still second that.
Sounds like.
Well, a motion gives us something to talk to.
Yeah.
Totally.
We probably should have started with something like that and talked to it. So,
I think it turned out well,
or we haven't voted yet.
Okay.
Is there a second?
though. I did.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion for this item? Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yeah,
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So that positive recommendation, we'll move on to city council. Now for item number 9, discussion. We've had our public hearing, but this is the general plan text amendment for, do we see recommending to the city council whether to amend the general plan to permit a manufacturing zone within the Southtown neighborhood.
Not permit.
Permit, yes. And Scott, will you, or John, can you pull the map and maybe for all of us, especially Commissioner Green,
The general
just to
plan,
highlight the Southtown neighborhood so we can specifically see that the entire area we're talking about?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I assume everybody studied the map and memorized it.
I have studied it.
No.
Not the memorizing.
just thinking.
So to this one, are we discussing this as well?
Yes, so this,
I mean, this is tough because then we come in, is this the right, is manufacturing the right use for this swath of our city? To me, the last one was an easy one. This one's harder because for the reasons we said, is manufacturing what you want to see when you drive into the city? Is manufacturing going to create the same amount of tax revenue that, even residential homes will, because, if those are apartments there, that's pretty good income for the city every month, right? And
manufacturing is going to put the building like proposing. I don't think it's going to distract from Washington Boulevard or what people think coming in.
so if that was a lumber mill, you don't feel that would be a
A
distraction?
lumber mill,
That's maybe.
it is, but the only the lumber mills I've seen, I wouldn't want on that corner. It's a different types of building you're putting in there. Now,
But that's what-
they put the business out front like you have. What some people can see.
Thank you, John.
And this what, if that zone gets laid down here, that's the risk those cities open up to.
That's where we.
So number-
That's like-
You wanna laser?
if you,
Control that.
thanks.
Laser pointer.
Don't watch the dot, guys. It's, no, it's on the ceiling.
Oh, I see, okay. Missed it.
We're gonna vote and everybody watch the red, right? Yes and no. All right, so Southtown neighborhood is 6 right here. And remind me what the contingent of 5 is. Is that just like
5 is the Weaver School District.
oh, that's where the future school will go. Okay, that's right. So anyway, 6, so you can see Washington Boulevard right here. So we're just barely east of Washington Boulevard. 1700 is where the light is we're talking now, and it goes to the south to the border of our city, which right here on 1500, this is that Cooperstown apartment complex that's been approved, the movie theater. Across the street, there's townhomes in this section, which is Harrisville, but it's only Harrisville to here, and then the road goes back to North Ogden. And most of this area here is what is undeveloped. There's houses along Washington Boulevard, and then the rest is just farm fields or vacant, horse property or whatever it's being used as. And so the one tonight is this little corner right here. But this would be basically the entire Southtown area, saying somewhere in this 6 block would we see a manufacturing zone being permitted.
Is EK in Ogden City or is it in?
EK Bailey?
Yeah.
It's in Harrisville.
Oh, it's in here. So it's past 6.
So, yeah, so right here is the townhomes, that Sunset Townhomes.
Okay, yeah.
And then the movie theater is right here.
Yeah.
And the trailer park that's at Ogden City is right here.
Yeah.
So-
Somewhere.
And
Yeah,
well, and one, I believe that Harrisville, so just south of 6. In this area, yeah.
it's fight.
Is they have got preliminary approval for a mixed use. But like residential and commercial development.
Yeah, so going south here, just so we get the feel, but there's a small little self-storage complex right here. And then Harrisville's Public Works building here. But that building, and I think there's 20-something acres all in here, has received preliminary approval for mixed use, which is mostly, from the sounds of it, like townhomes and residential use.
So a new
I don't
village
know
of
a long-
Providence Point, right?
Huh?
A new village of Providence Point.
Yeah. I know. I don't know, in their mixed use ordinance, at least in the past, I know with Harrisville, they require residential being set back a certain distance off Washington. That's why those townhomes you see at 1500 are set back, and there's
So
a
far.
vacant lot there.
Yeah.
Is they've reserved that for commercial use. So anyway, that kind of gives us a lay of the land. Question here before us, asking for recommendation to city council is somewhere in that number 6, should we allow manufacturing zone? And more specifically, which has been stemmed to this conversation, is the applicant would like to put the storage units in that manufacturing zone. So,
This is, this like triggers in a homeowner, I think, some of the worst neighbors, right? Like the ultimate fear is that your neighbor, well, I have a lot of fears, but among them is that my neighbor sells to a dog food factory. Right? Like honestly, that I can't imagine living in anything like if I want to live next.
An Ogden fear.
Right, yeah, yeah, having driven Wall Avenue a number of times, it's, so, I mean, it's hard to put manufacturing somewhere. It really is, it's unless it's a well-defined area that's where it already exists, it's hard to put manufacturing somewhere.
I just feel the same with that comment, specifically as well. I mean, as you guys know, I'm new to this process, but I studied the general plan before interviewing for this position, and I felt like it was a really well thought out plan, and that lots of community input had, shaped and crafted this plan. So for me, I do feel very hesitant to deviate from the general plan for this particular property, specifically with the stoplight on the corner. So I guess that would be my initial thought.
It's a really good point, because when we look at the general plan, which is really kind of our guiding document, because a lot of hours and dedication from citizens from the city went into developing this general plan. And, clearly, over the years that I've been on the commission, there's been a vision for this development of this Southtown area. And it's really the entrance of our city. There's been a lot of discussion about keeping it, a certain aesthetic and a certain feel, we went through the whole form-based code and really focused on the development of this area. The other thing is there's proposed new elementary school right there as well. And so I just, as compelling as Mr. Severing's proposal is, and because we've heard from him personally and we feel for this, if it was somewhere else in the city, great, but right there on Washington Boulevard on this key corner, I just don't feel like in this particular area that the residents of North Ogden and all their input in the general plan feel that this is the area for manufacturing and or self-storage. So even, initially I thought, well, maybe if it's further back off Washington Boulevard, but it's just currently the general plan calls for that to be multifamily and commercial use. And I think that's really in the best interest of the city, long-term, to keep it in that, the nature of this particular Southtown area.
yeah, I would, I concur with our planning director that this specific area before us tonight is not what our best use would be for ground in North Ogden, along Washington and along 1700 as well, those roads. Now, I honestly, myself would look at that and say, the need of self-storage, do we accommodate another facility in the city and all those things? Potentially in that whole Southtown area, if, to me, if you look and say, well, somewhere further to the south or right where the number 6 is to the south of that, something, where it's tucked back, it may not be, it may be a use that satisfies the needs for residents. But it's not taking away any commercial desire for future. Now granted, when we talk commercial, that's obviously not right now, so, but at the same time, you know, I look at a lot of places in the city that, you know, I remember, you know, so growing up, dating, my dad was in charge of the company that owned the property where Smith's what is. And they sold the property to Smith's to bring them to town the first time, you know, and had they just taken the rest of their ground and just said, you know, they were the developers that built Lakeview Heights, you know, so they had a vision for North Ogden and said, you know, we want to make sure we can accommodate the houses that we're building and the residents and, you know, an old gas station turned into Smith's and everything. But, you know, imagine if it was back then saying, oh, hey, we're going to make steel sheds or things here and they turn it into that. And it's a manufacturing area forever.
Yep.
You know, what does that do to the city? Now, that doesn't mean there's not a place for any of that stuff. But to me, the corridor of Washington and anywhere we have lights like 1700 are key areas to reserve for tax dollars.
Yep.
You know, I don't necessarily, you know, Commissioner Webb, not to oppose what your opinion is saying, hey, that building looks nice.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at saying, but I don't want to put the burden of saying on the residents of the city to say, well, to have nice services in the city with the police force and everything else, we need to generate that off property tax because we've used all our corridor areas for businesses that only generate property tax for the city.
Yep.
So in a mixed bag of potentially there could be a spot in Southtown that would work. In my opinion, if I had to put a distance to it, you know, whether it's 500 or 800 feet off of Washington or a couple hundred feet off of any intersection areas, you know, and I'm not, I guess, in all honesty, going further away from Washington. 1700 connects to Harrisville and goes through the city. Going further south, 1500 most likely will never go through. Just to orient you guys, as it goes west, it will hit and turn north and come back to 1700 because west is where Harrisville's Park and ponds and everything are off of 89 on the other side. And so that road will really never go through. So it kind of wraps back around to 1700, which then again, when all of Southtown develops as number 6, 1500 wrapping back to 1700, which means 1700's light becomes services all of that area. So in a long drawn out explanation, I would say, you know, this, in my opinion, as it was when this came before us before, this is not an area I feel like would be best suited for the city as storage units.
Are you talking this particular property, talking the zone? Zone
Well,
six there?
as we're looking at the particular property that's brought before us for the applicant to kind of know my opinion and the city, but as well saying as a whole in Southtown as an area, it's kind of, to me, it's depends on where it's at answer.
Exactly. And if there's any place where manufacturing is gonna be allowed in the city, it's somewhere in that vicinity, right?
Well, in my opinion, it would be grow on your existing manufacturing you already have.
Yeah.
But that's mostly been built west of Lock It Up Storage.
Yeah.
Potentially you could have some growth there.
Right.
You know, this is an area where raw ground could be something. Most anywhere else is gonna be a building torn down and something replacing it.
I
And so
appreciate everything you
what is
said,
that?
and I think I come to a slightly different conclusion sometimes when I think about Washington Boulevard being a highway. You know, this isn't a road where people are gonna go, and maybe it turns into that, but they're not leisurely driving 25 miles an hour down Washington Boulevard, la-di-da-di-da, looking for a place to shop. Many people use that as a highway. It's, you know, from between North Ogden and Ogden is this area. And they're kind of zooming by at 50, 55, and in that sense, I can see manufacturing being right there. You know,
So that's why the stoplights are that much more valuable,
yeah, okay.
is because that is the area that slows people down to
Okay.
say,
You
here's our
always keep me
service,
honest. You always-
here's our services.
Okay,
Well, I think historically it was the highway, right? Before we had 2700 going west, those of us who grew up here, that was the highway. Took way too long to get to I-15. You didn't go that way. But that's changed, you know, and you had a lot of houses that would use Washington Boulevard, but the lights will change that. That is the asset. I think another asset that we haven't brought up tonight that really does need to be thought through is, and it triggered my thought when you talked about the Harrisville Ponds, that's where Coldwater Creek dumps. And we've had some really interesting discussions about the attributes that we have in North Ogden. The views of the mountains, we talk about all the time because it's obvious. Coldwater Creek is one that, you know, developers might hate it as we start to think about this asset a little bit more. But we've had presentations, the city council's had presentations, and that's a real asset to our community. It's a real asset. If that old Kings area, Pizza Man area ever got changed, you know, you could surface it there or whatever, but I mean, I fished in that thing as a kid and it's a real creek. I thought they were escapees from the fish farm. They're not. Come to find out, it's the northernmost tributary to the Weaver River. And as it goes through there, it's a really interesting attribute.
And there's escapees from the fish farm.
Probably
It's
both,
yeah.
probably both, but it's you know, it's an attribute in North Ogden that we shouldn't forget as we do future planning. It's a really interesting attribute and there is raw land around it. And so there's some really neat things that could happen. When we talk about this crown jewel of a road, right, that goes in a certain area where there's big houses. But what about an attribute of where there aren't big houses, where people could get out and walk around and know their neighbors and there can be a little bit more safety and things like that. And that's Coldwater Creek is a really interesting asset that we shouldn't overlook that happens to be in this area as well.
You know, I think when we look to the future plans as well, is, you know, maybe right now, people aren't scrambling at the doorstep to open their businesses here. But when you look at these corners and what is sort of on the horizon to be built there, all of those apartments, all of those townhouses, you know, south of there by the movie theater, there's more townhouses, more high end apartments and things like that. But that's what, you know, the vision is for this area. So there's going to be a lot of new people congested in this particular area of our city. And that in itself will drive businesses. Now, self-storage may be one of those that there would certainly be a need for, but I don't think on that corner, I'm not as concerned that, you know, we will never get any good commercial businesses, you know, vying for that. But they're not knocking on the door right now, but there is a lot of development on the horizon in this particular area of our city.
So
And that's going to be a tremendous number of people, a walkability, maybe some, you know, this creek being featured, you know, there's a lot of potential for very high and nice
For
development.
clarity,
in that
I believe
area.
Coldwater Creek is just north of the property in question.
It is.
I don't think it actually runs through this property.
No,
But-
well, yes, it doesn't, but there's actually
There's a huge wetland in the
Sure, there is.
southwest
Yeah.
corner of this.
there's water that kind of, it will need to be diverted and, you know.
Yeah. You know, I know, and
Activated.
I know that we're not all going to probably vote the same on this one, but it's okay. But I'm gonna go ahead and put a motion on the table so we can kind of move forward, because I think we're all kind of wrestling with, you know, trying to figure out where we're going with this. So I'd like to make a motion that we present a recommendation to the city council that we I would say not amend the general plan to prevent manufacturing uses within the Southtown neighborhood near approximately 1651 North and 1659 North Washington Boulevard.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion any further? Mr. Watson, you've been pretty quiet.
I look
It's your turn.
at, all right, first of all, I think box storage or the storage that's just up from that borders Washington. Which is surprising, right? I mean, because it doesn't border Washington with storage units. So I think that's important to note that we already have that established. I also think this is 240 feet of frontage to Washington, which by Brandon's calculations is about 3 seconds if you hit a green light. So we say swath of land, but it's
Narrow.
swath going back. It's 3 to 4 seconds of land that you see if you hit a green light right there. If we zone that as, if we're comfortable with commercial, are we comfortable with what kind of commercial, right? Like, I think that we're saying here, I don't know, maybe if he did put, what am I trying to say, that what you said underneath on the first floor, the small businesses there?
Retail.
Yes, thank you, retail, that's a tough word for me. If the retail was there, is it commercial then? Right, then what is it zoned? Is it commercial at that point, and does that make you happy or not happy? If it's a Dollar General, does that make you happy? Right, like, I mean, that's my
Totally.
question here. I actually think I've been swayed. Initially, I didn't love the plan. In fact, it kind of, my knee-jerk reaction was like, storage units. I actually like the plan, and I think that's good use for that corner. I know, unpopular opinion.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that I'm gonna vote no on this, because I'm of the opinion that we could have some pocket areas of manufacturing, that's fine. And
Sorry, Brandon.
no, that's all I'm gonna say.
I think we also have a willing applicant here. And I think that we can't fully. But I would be remiss to not like bring that up in the discussion, that I think we have an applicant who is looking for a solution. And maybe we haven't found the solution, I don't know, but we have an applicant that is wanting to do something with the city that is win-win.
But the item before us is not applicant specific, just remind you.
Yes, no, I agree.
Specific.
I agree with that. I'm just,
Do you want manufacturing in that area?
What did
I'm
you-
throwing just a general statement in the discussion area.
What do you mean pockets of manufacturing? Because I thought we were talking about zoning this particular piece of property. Is that correct?
This is, should we allow manufacturing? It's anywhere in that number 6.
And to go a step
Spot.
further to
Yeah,
amend the general plan,
And
The general plan
I'm
is
probably
yes,
in a
it's
different.
amend the general
Brandon,
plan to
that I
allow it.
don't like manufacturing in this area.
So
There are no invalid opinions here, folks.
There aren't, yeah,
Nobody has to agree with me.
for me,
well, and so I'm of the opinion that manufacturing is not for this area. I said, I'm also of the opinion that even though I don't know how you shoehorn it in there, there may be a spot somewhere in there for self-storage, not on the corner. My biggest concern with the corner as well, and it's a hard piece, that's, I'm a developer, I understand, what's hard about this piece is it's a light and you say it's 240 feet. But if somebody stops at that light and there's a store south of this place, they got to drive 800 feet west to get the street and then go south. And then, so you're not, because UDOT is not going to allow another access for 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet. And so, although it is only 240 feet, you're controlling the gateway to the next 500 feet to the south of retail, commercial, or whatever. And so that's what's tough. And it's just kind of the way the piece is and the way UDOT is and the way stoplights and development work, but
I wish we had the ideal person knocking down your door from that frontage piece. It'd just be so nice.
What is that?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer. to that.
7-Eleven.
No,
I don't think so.
don't
I
think it
actually
is.
used to think that
I'm
it was
kidding.
a service station, but I don't think that anymore. I don't think the ideal client there
We
for the
have,
city, in my
Yeah.
opinion, driving by is, Maverick's great, Smith's is great. I usually hit the Shell station on the way to the freeway now. That's just kind of my go-to with a quick crack car wash. I don't know that I'm gonna get gas going that direction. If I'm gonna go that direction, probably going to Costco. I'm probably gonna fill up at Costco.
Yeah,
talked to
I mean-
I talked to Bill Child about that program custody he's putting in. It took him forever to convince them it'd be a good place to put it. They said they didn't want to do it.
I think it's a great spot. I'm happy about that.
can't wait for them to.
We can go get a custard when we recuse ourselves.
But that wasn't the point. The point is
Yeah.
the company didn't think so.
Yeah,
Let me ask you this,
But they finally convinced them
yeah.
it would be good, but it took a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of effort to do. it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another person we had come in here, they couldn't find businesses to come in here. Because it's just not viable, people aren't shopping here.
so what is it about manufacturing that's that's bad, where a car wash is okay? Is it the noise?
That's good.
I don't think,
Is it
I
the-
don't
the
think a
drugstore
car
in
wash,
and out?
I don't think a car wash
Okay.
is okay.
I'm just saying there's a car wash there.
Yeah.
And I'm not emotionally tied to this. I just trying to be fair.
So,
So. I think you all know how I feel. And
I mean, that's it. I mean, to me, the biggest thing is helping the area and not cutting off everything else, but
I also don't agree the car wash should be there. But it is there now.
yeah, I
And so-
actually wish the car wash was in a
Tire
long,
store.
narrow strip and not all this frontage of
Yeah.
a car wash.
But I feel like
Me
the mistakes that
Yeah,
we made,
don't get me started.
maybe it's not time to fix them, but the mistakes that we've had.
Yep.
Next door, we have a car wash. I mean, like,
The city council did the car wash.
right, and so now.
those are, you know, that's the hard thing, because you say, yes, does that fit? Well, here we go, say. Today, we've talked about saying, well, we need self-storage, we need this, everybody's full, so then. Our commissions and councils in the future saying, why did they
Who
do
the
that? Because we needed it then, you know, and it's like, that. I don't know if there's a busier looking
Store
tire
side.
store, any, you know, you go around, cars lined up, and it's like, obviously. There's a need there, and I
That
think
tire
the car
store needs
wash
more
does,
parking.
you know, yeah, and so.
That's pretty.
It's hard, and what's hard about it is. The services that come to a community. When there's, you know, it's all based on rooftops and population. Well, a gas station, a car wash, a tire store. You know, those things survive on less rooftops than a Target and a Walmart and a, you know. That's a,
No, don't say it.
you know, a Olive Garden, you know,
No.
or something like that, right?
You're dangerously close.
And so. So what comes first? And that's what, and what's difficult is, you know, currently. We have. 600 residential units right around that block that have been approved and not yet built. And so. We have 160 townhomes that have just completed, which represent anywhere from 300 to 500 people, I'm sure. But. If you look at the general plan and you look at proposed projects or approved projects. You know, Southtown area number 6 going up to. Number 4 really there. You could have. Conceivably. At build out. We probably have 15% of our city's population in that area.
Yeah,
It's a lot, it's gonna
true.
be a lot of people.
yeah.
And so
It's gonna be a lot.
when you look at it that way and say, well, okay, then what is gonna be at the intersection then?
Yep.
Right, yeah.
And looking at it that way more so than,
Yeah.
well, today,
Specific.
yeah,
It's
7-Eleven.
why
probably
your,
fine,
it's
but
why
I
your
don't know that
Smith's
we want
property
that.
is such a great example for us to, because it could have gone a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when the 7-Eleven went in, I walked from Green Acres to get a Slurpee the first day with Buster Bellin. And it was all past the tomato fields, but now it's, you know. It works, it really works, and that's because
Well,
people stuck to their guns.
Yeah, and the Smiths was successful there as the city grew. The commercial, the ground that was retained as commercial by zoning around that stayed until the need was, and then it got bought. Smiths moved, went bigger. And all the rest of the stores, and so we have a viable center.
Yep.
Because planning said, we don't, you know,
Right, preserve these.
we're not
areas.
changing it just for what
Yep.
happens to fit today.
Well, even throw Barker's service station, you know, in that same spot when it was a dirt parking lot like that. You know, it was really good vision in sticking with that, and we are talking about a similar.
Until they had to put a road through it.
Yeah,
There's gonna be a tremendous number of people congregating
yeah.
in that area very
Yeah.
shortly, and that will bring business.
Should we
you know.
have a? Are we still on the?
So we're in discussion. We have
Okay.
our motion, a second, discussing it. Once we're kind of comfortable with the end of the discussion, then we'll call for a vote. Is there any more discussion? Let's vote then.
And so the motion
Thank you.
So
is to make a
currently, yes, it's
negative,
been a while.
is to
the,
make a
the
negative.
motion out right
recommendation.
now with the second is to recommend to city council that we disallow or we do not allow manufacturing in the South.
Right now, changing the general.
So we're not changing the general plan, leaving for this area. Commissioner Barker,
Tough decision.
It's a hard one.
It is. I'm gonna go no.
Okay, hold on. So A no vote means that you are for changing the general plan.
Well, no vote, we need a new if everybody voted no, and I'm not suggesting everyone will.
Then
The
it would-
motion would fall, and we'd need another motion, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So-
you're,
Yeah,
you
but-
are not for leaving the general plan as it is. Is that what you're
A no
saying?
means you're up to changing the general plan.
Correct.
A no means you're interested in allowing manufacturing in zone six.
Just making sure it's all right.
I just want to
Work this
clarify.
in.
what it-
No, it's.
like, what are we voting on?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's a big difference.
Nicole first and Lisa second. No.
That's what you are, Scott?
Yeah.
Willing to change?
I'm fine. I'm good.
No, willing to change the general plan.
I am, I think the
Okay.
general plan is something that can always be looked at and read out and revisited all the time.
Okay. Commissioner Mason,
I'm no.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
To change the general. plan.
Yes,
Shocking, I know.
Commissioner Watson.
yes, I'm not willing to change.
I'm a hesitant yes on that one. Doesn't matter, it's yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Team no.
So, hey, that's, and this, we have an applicant that's not getting what they prefer, so.
That's
As much as I'd like to
so
help them, it's just the
The
wrong.
general plan text amendment number 9 is being passed on the city council as a recommendation not to include. It doesn't end with us, as you know, this goes to them and you have your opportunity to speak with them and sway them however way you may or may not.
Which,
um,
may I,
desire.
which is why I'm suggesting that we still analyze each of these three pieces for you, so that we can have a recommendation on each of them. To arm you when you go to city council.
But because this was done in a little bit different way, there also will be a public hearing at city council, right?
Right.
So there will be a public hearing. If you have people in support, bring them.
It'll be for all three of the pieces.
So. Yes,
And I didn't mean to be disrespectful with my high five there. Honestly, that was more of the fact that we generally vote unanimously on things. And the split vote, I think, spoke to the difficulty of this. And I think that carries
Yes.
forward to the city council when it's a split vote too, that this isn't something that was black and white. And so I wasn't necessarily celebrating anything.
other than the fact that we deliberated and had
Right.
different opinions, which is great.
Yeah, so.
All right. Well, thank you. So now let's move on to item number 11, which is public comments again.
We gotta go back,
We gotta go
we
back
gotta
to
go back to
8.
here.
Oh, yes, we skipped 8. So now we're seeking a motion for number 8, annexation 2023-1. Consideration and action on a legislative application to annex the property located at approximately 1651 North and 1659 North Washington Boulevard with the zone request of an R4 and an M1.
And this is an opportunity for the planning commission, not saying that you have to do this. You could say yes on R4, no on M1. So it's all R4, yes on R4 with maybe with a consideration of commercial out there on 1700 in Washington, or, you know, something else that meets the general plan. Now that you've said, as the planning commission on a majority vote, we don't want to change our general plan. The general plan in this area still does permit mixed use, commercial and residential. So it's up to you now in the annexation piece to make a recommendation for what underlying land use zone that would come in. And then it's the applicant's option essentially to, you know, the annexation. If the council doesn't go the land use direction they want, they can pull that ripcord at any point during the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, sorry, I got caught up in the other two and forgot we hadn't addressed 8. So currently, as we sit, the recommendation, what's being asked is an R4 and an M1. We just recommended that they don't allow M1 in this area. But that doesn't mean the motion can't suggest it and or saying a motion could suggest, you know, R4. Because currently on the general plan is that it's land is commercial, right?
It's bold, so it's.
Is our
area-
and commercial.
That whole Southtown area would be like a mix of uses to include commercial.
Both commercial and residential.
So this is the thing I was always really struggling with, is this specific piece of land was, I didn't love to see manufacturing on that corner. Okay, manufacturing in that general area, I thought was appropriate. I didn't love to see manufacturing in the corner. Although I thought the storage facility was fine, really, so,
Well, the other option, I guess, would be not to, that we need to extend things is say. If you're not comfortable with designating both zones, saying we need a more specific map specifying the exact area that's going manufacturing before you give a recommendation. Which then delays
Yeah,
everything
they'll
because
be
they
back
have to
here.
come back,
Yeah.
but.
Yep.
Our,
well, I'm definitely interested in annexing this property. I think that's in the city's best interest and, our residents.
So you
We're
would,
in discussion.
Well,
Yes.
can we just leave it the way it is, where it's a mixed use type thing?
It's nothing right now.
it's in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
it's county.
So-
Weaver County.
Yeah, when it comes in, it has to come in and have a zone applied. And so
Okay.
there should not ever be an unzoned piece of land in the city. This is what your body exists for. State gives us that, ability.
one job, or one job.
Because the general plan kind of covers this area as mixed use and
Okay.
commercial.
Yeah,
If we recommended an R4 zoning, and there would be nothing to prevent anybody in that area from coming forward and requesting a rezone to commercial
So,
if there was a.
yes, the only
Commercial
caveat to
activity.
this. To consider, which is odd, but if we just say we recommend that it come in as an R4 zone. You can put townhomes right up to that corner.
Oh,
Yeah, I think what the applicant is suggesting is better than that, right?
yeah.
Like
But so-
practically speaking. I would be fine with townhomes on the back, so I think R4 is great. I don't know what the best use is up by the road. But I personally have come to the conclusion that I have no issue on exactly what. The applicant recommended. But I don't like the idea of manufacturing on the other side of Washington Boulevard, going back towards an elementary school.
Mhm,
Where there's likely to be a lot of residential stuff.
mhm.
On the east side of Washington Boulevard. Yeah, you might have a few more things here and there, but you're pretty much set. You got some big lots, you got people with horses, you got, it is what it is. Maybe it'll keep changing. That being said, I have zero opinion on what the best use of land is up against 2600, and I see the light as a real issue. And I wish for the applicant there was
400?
some better thing. And I don't necessarily think that's a gas station, but if there were 1 million people maybe living down there, maybe it would be.
So I guess my thought is, as we give a recommendation to the city council, it's probably more. Not so specific on the zone as it is, if we feel like more of a mixed use, being that this piece. Covers such a wide array, being that it's so long and deep, and let that discussion happen. Saying residential and commercial. Cause
Rather than like.
without a
doing
specific saying,
split
hey, we
to-
want this 4 acres to be commercial, this 4 acres to be residential,
Yeah.
or vice versa, or whatever. Is saying, a mixed use until there's a more detailed description of.
Well, kind of like
parcels, but-
the original proposal was R4 and M1. Would you?
But nothing specified where what. each
Yeah,
was.
but would you kind of
And so something to that effect.
think
but-
something similar like R4 and C1?
Yeah,
Or
well, I
with
think
the-
we have the mixed use zone.
yeah, I think the wording Scott gave us was. Yes, with an R4 and a consideration of commercial,
Yep,
Mhm,
which I like.
right?
mhm.
As a side note. Are we incorrectly zoning self-storage? Because it sounds like the council is okay with that being there if it was zoned commercial. If self-storage was commercial, are they okay with it? If self-storage is manufacturing, they're not.
Yeah, but if self-storage was commercial, then you could have it up next to Smith's.
Yeah, I know.
Everywhere.
I'm just saying, you hear what I'm saying though? Is it miszoned? I don't know.
Storage in the profession of zoning is a really ambiguous use. You have storage units that are excellent residential neighbors. You have storage units that are great manufacturing neighbors, commercial neighbors.
Yeah.
You know, we have them on the west side of Kaysville where I'm at. They're super quiet uses. They're clean. They're well taken care of. They're relatively new, so they aren't dilapidated or depreciated structures. You can't access them after 10 p.m. and all their lights are shielded and turned inward. I mean, in fact, they're less obnoxious than my neighbor's light that whatever it is, like ring camera light that turns on when a cat walks.
No, don't.
Yep.
get me started.
Those are more obnoxious than the storage. So they're hard to classify. Commercial might be perfectly viable for them, but it opens up, you know, think
Yeah.
about all of those, like Terry was saying, underperforming commercial
Sure.
areas of our city would all of a sudden become gold for those, and
We
they're
don't-
just
yeah.
passive uses. They're
Yeah.
not
Totally.
sales tax generating.
I want to be clear, that wasn't my point. My point was, is it miszoned? Does it
Yeah, yeah.
needs to have, does it
Right.
need to have a different zone? Because I think storage facility, manufacturing, very different from each other.
Well, it begs the question too, like, the old commercial zones are changing. Like, is commercial too broad? I mean, for example, I was in, yesterday and today, I was in the UPS store. And there were so many people, I was in there for a little while and I was like, how much of your business is returns to Amazon? They said 70% of their business are returns to Amazon at the UPS store down here by Lee's.
Wow.
70% of their business. So if we're looking at sales tax, Amazon is our biggest competitor. And the place that they're going is the UPS store to return those things. And so how is this going to evolve? I don't know, you know, but we think, oh, retail coming in. Well, what is retail right now? And manufacturing space is, as things repatriate, are getting more and more important in Ogden in general. But they're turning, I just picked up a storage unit in, you know, right by Tanner Clinic in Layton. That's the old Kmart building, and it's great inside. You know, eventually it might be great outside. It's not great outside right now. But it's really nice inside. And there are retail places that are being turned into storage unit for different companies as part of this. And I know that's kind of an extended thing and it extends our night, but I do feel it's planning in a way.
Well, what's the recommendations on this particular piece?
I like to make a motion that we say yes to the annex with an R4 and a consideration of commercial.
Recommend that to the city council.
And recommend that to the city council.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend R4 in consideration with consideration of commercial. Any other discussion?
I would add consideration of commercial or some sort of further definition of commercial.
That's already been defined. That's really not up for debate.
Yeah. we
Yeah,
can.
okay, that's fair enough. I'll redact that.
All right,
Do you want to
Commissioner,
locate, is there any location piece of that commercial? Is that, are you trying? to
Towards,
put the commercial-
towards Washington.
Right. That's a good point.
consideration of commercial towards Washington.
On frontage, Washington frontage, whatever we want to say there.
Okay,
So I voted no on the last item, but I think I can support that. I mean, I think that's consistent. No, this motion. No, I think it's consistent. with
let's
what-
start with you, Commissioner Mason.
I mean, yeah,
Nobody asked yet, but
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
I thought we were discussing things still.
Commissioner Watson,
yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Commissioner Green, sorry.
You're like, yes.
I ran out of places to put check marks, so sorry. So the recommendation will be passed on to city council that this property be annexed into North Ogden with a designation of R4 and consideration of commercial as well near Washington Boulevard. Now, we can move on to our item number 11, public comments. We'll open up again for public comments. If you'd like to address the planning commission, please step up to the podium and do so. You,
Is it
anything you
public?
want.
For the record, I noticed Mr. Severn had his hand up a couple times and wasn't calling. It wasn't.
I know it's not supposed to, but.
No, I thought you behaved appropriately there.
Cause here's one of the struggles that I've run into since I started this project is the M1 zoning, just like you're talking about here. And the only reason we come up with that, was because you allowed the M1 to I see the same thing going on here, is everybody's looking at M1 manufacturing, we don't want big trucks coming in here, we don't want, you know, a lumber yard on the corner, we don't want this and that. To me, this should be fitting into a more of a commercial application, because it's commercial buildings, technically. But for whatever reason, this one is in one zone, and short of trying to do a whole big thing, trying to change that. And I know it's a little late now because you've all voted on it, but you know, I'm kind of with you, you know, because one of the other meetings a year ago or so, the minute they said, man, one, we had this public comment standing up, we don't want that next to us, we don't want it next to the school. I don't want our kids running through the manufacturing zone playing in there. Well, first of all, they shouldn't be in there anyway. But I understand that whole concept, and I disagree with the manufacturing as well. But now the other concept, you made a comment that on the street side, that UDOT won't allow me access off of Washington until I'm down to 1,000 feet. Is that what you said?
Future development, they have their, as they classify roads, and I can't remember what they classify Washington, but Washington might be either 1,250 feet or 2,500 feet. They base it on traffic and speed. So the houses have access, or people, but as development, what will end up happening is if somebody goes in for an access, you know, and says, hey, well, then they require that person to give a cross access easement on their property to the neighbor. So UDOT can deny the neighbor property in the future, and it has to access through the next door.
So just for clarification for me, I have 3 accesses right now to coming into off of Washington into that piece there. So whatever gets built on that corner in my piece, there's not going to be any big way they access off into that. So they're all going to have to come down.
No, your piece will get, what I'm saying is, as development happens.
Yeah.
They say, yeah, we're gonna give a driveway on the corner, but we're not gonna give one next door, like, or a street that comes in. You know,
Okay.
the
Because I was
distances
gonna
with
say,
the
if that-
streets, so.
If I would, you know, where I have those 3 driveways and I could combine them into one roadway coming out at the very end of that property, then that makes sense. And that's what I was thinking. But if they didn't allow that, almost my storage units work out better, because then they just got to come down 1,700 and in and back out anyway. So that's.
It's more of the property as it develops to the south, you know, they decide, hey, we're gonna put a median out in the road, and all of a sudden.
Right.
The neighbors to the south they have to go to the light to get in and back, and. I don't know, it's UDOT.
And so just the consensus that I've got, a lot of you were okay with the storage units except for
The
the M1
location.
zoning.
I don't know,
Well,
I think
not
it's
up
just
on
the
the corner.
location.
For the most part. Other than you did the retail, you wanted the retail. So I just know where I can, you know, what I can try
And the light, you know, the light's a real issue. I
Yeah.
think the light is a real issue. As you're like planning and strategizing, I think if you keep that light in mind, it'll be helpful.
Yeah, so I wouldn't lump us into, we're okay with storage units there,
Well,
but. We
Yeah,
would
I
like
mean, I'm not
we
saying
would like
that-
the corner reserved for commercial retail,
Screen TV.
something that helps better than storage
And
units
so-
for the city.
what does general plan say? How far off Washington are you gonna strip commercial?
I don't think there's a measurement designated in general
Is
plan.
there any, I mean,
So it's really kind of up to.
I know you got,
What's it, right?
what's that first, what's coming 300 or is it 350? 300 coming back.
You could look at the depth of the commercial parcels, that'd probably give you a pretty good idea. I don't know what the depth of Maverick is or Walgreens or something like that, but that's probably a pretty good idea of the least amount of space you can put and get a viable commercial space with parking and ingress, egress, all that on there. Yeah,
I know that was across from you on the corner. I know some developers who tried to put some things there, and the road to the west was too close, and it made it too hard to fit on that corner.
Well,
So
wait,
that's,
come and loop
yeah,
back,
that's
yeah.
why,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, even 7-Eleven had to shoehorn in there to try and fit.
Right,
And so I wouldn't use that road as a gauge, but for good commercial, but in the sense,
well, if you don't use the road for a gauge, in my opinion, you don't have enough room there, like you said, because that road comes in and swerves back, but if you used car wash, for instance, it's just very narrow, then there's a very limited.
no, that's why I was saying, I would say that road that's there should be back further from Washington, not closer. Like that's
Oh, the 300.
7-Eleven had a really hard time fitting in there. And some other uses wanted to go on that corner.
But enough for that. Make it to that whole
That's
development.
actually 385. So 300 is the one that comes out of the.
Oh.
Townhomes,
Oh.
385 is the next.
Oh, that's that first street coming out of West Street.
It's 385, yeah.
So because that's what I would just say is keep that in mind is there were some commercial people that wanted that corner that couldn't fit because that road was too close, that connection.
And that's why I was wondering if you had a guideline of what your setbacks on commercial is.
No, I mean, well, you can see the building department what setbacks would be, but that
Yeah.
really for uses of size, I don't know.
Yeah, Scott's recommendation of looking at some of those other things, Walgreens and stuff, that's probably really helpful.
I tried to get a Walgreens go in there and they told me no.
Yeah, not just.
They're not a Walgreens, yeah.
Have you
No,
looked into it?
CES.
CVS.
You got a Walgreens just over here. So I contacted CVS and asked them if they were interested in it. No,
There's nothing within walking distance of it.
see, that's what I'm saying is
All the apartments get built, then they might be like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And those apartments,
Yeah.
all those people
They have.
That's-
performing-
walk there,
it's-
it'll be,
Yeah, it's.
it'll be prime property.
Have you considered a custard or an overpriced Italian Coke with wine or?
underneath storage, yeah, sure.
I mean, I just.
all right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Chris Bolger, North Ogden. Just one point I wanted to make, you said that we're competing against Amazon. Technically, no, because we get the sales tax from Amazon.
Oh, good point.
So that
Very
was
good
just one
point.
thing I'm learning budgets.
And Great Harvest and Papa John's or wherever pizza place is gets all those 70%ers to come and buy something.
Yeah, no, I didn't have an opinion on whether it's pro or con.
And then everybody else is so frustrated there's not a parking
Yeah.
spot in that parking lot because everybody's
I
trying to go to the UPS
blown-
store.
I was
That's
blown
not
away at the amount of business Amazon returns. It's like what they do.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, get a sandwich while you're.
Anyway, and if there's,
Sometimes
there's a
you're waiting
vote for a
around.
gas station. From the wife too, because a lot of people, it's so busy up in this area now that, I
Mhm.
mean, trying to get in and out of 7-Eleven's ridiculous. Maverick, same thing.
Mhm.
So I'm with you. I go to the Shell over there or someplace else. So
Sure.
that was it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have anybody online?
Nope.
All right. Any remarks from planning commissioners?
This is a tough one. I hate when we're,
We can't help the.
yeah,
person.
I mean, when someone comes with us, you know, with a decent idea and vision and it doesn't necessarily go their way, although I think, you know, we represent not just that applicant, we do represent 17,000 other people in the city, and I commend the deliberation that we gave here. I do think it was well thought out, and you know, I didn't necessarily get what I wanted out of tonight, but I thought that that everybody kind of,
That's a good.
trying to pat ourselves on the back, I guess, but I thought that there was, you know, this has been debated for a long time in here, and you know, the fact that it was a split vote isn't nothing. It means something that wasn't a black and white issue. So.
It was good planning
Yeah,
night.
yeah.
Eric's example of the Smiths was like huge to me.
Yeah.
We
Really
really
just
just
huge.
check to the city council now that will actually help him out from our discussion. Let's not go in empty handed. He's got he's put a lot of stuff up here he can put into what he wants.
Yeah.
Well, welcome aboard, Nisa.
Thank you.
That's longer than most of our meetings.
But shorter than some.
Yeah.
Anything from you, Scott?
I just wanted to say that the planning commission application process this time around was really difficult. We had really good pool of candidates, 5 of them. Nisa, so happy that you made it. Nisa met this morning or this afternoon and did the 1-hour training, so she's got to do the what hats do you wear training. And this application that Terry brought forward is literally all of it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
all of the application.
Yeah.
You know, short of an administrative hearing officer appeal, we're gonna hit every land use type.
Is there an application from our #1 fan there? I just remind you that there will be openings on the planning
I
commission.
think that's what he's looking at, city council.
Another quick update for the city, Terry brought up our market study, so we got a new scope for that. We do have a market study for South Town Center. I just got that last Wednesday. I'm reviewing it and they want to kick it off. So the first part of that process will be a market study to analyze the number of rooftops that we have on Washington Boulevard and our strip commercial as compared to what I think the reality of what we can expect is. These are economic development tools that help guide decisions like this. It'll be interesting to see what that says. In many cases, we are over allocated on strip commercial, and that's why there's places that are kind of failing or slow, and it's almost better to let those turn over to other uses and kind of push people into more prioritized commercial spaces. But that has been slow to get off the ground. We had a hard time just in the current economic market even getting people to respond to our RFP. And once we had one, they wanted to rescope it for time. So we're just working through that process.
Will that, you brought up, maybe, I don't know, a long time ago, when you were first here, those embedded elements into the community, like, you know, there were some specific spots, and I remember, you know, Washington, yeah, it was, I mean, one of them that we really talked about a lot was Fruitland Drive and Mountain Road, you know, things like that. Will that be a part of the study at all, or probably just?
Yeah, not this study. This one's gonna be pretty focused on what the Southtown area looks at, so it'll have a minor amount of like lead out from the study.
I mean, there were a couple of those that were down near Southtown,
I think
but those won't be included, correct?
No, I think that'll be future things to come out. Couple other quick notes on staffing. Eric Casperson has accepted a position back in Salt Lake City, so we're going to be looking at different things in the interim with some consulting services for engineering. Really have loved the experience we've had working with Eric. He's been wonderful. Wish him well. And then we're currently slated. The budget cycle is coming up. The current plan is for some replacement of Brandon's position or a planning position in our department, probably starting with the July 1 budget. So we'll go out for that next 6-8 weeks and give it a long enough time frame, long enough lead time to try to bring somebody in and give them some time to exit whatever they're at. If they, we could make an offer and start July 1. So
Does that city position, does it need to be a civil engineer, or, what's the requirement there?
For the city engineer?
I mean, an engineer is helpful.
But it doesn't even have to be an engineer.
Well, if they're not an engineer, then they'd be project managing.
Got it.
But when we would need an engineer to help, do like development reviews.
Got it.
And so we've typically leaned towards an engineer, but there has been some talk about like a project manager type position.
Okay.
That would then work with the consultant.
Aeronautical engineers.
Yeah, I mean, really, it would be, honestly, we're kind of open to anything right now. Like we're trying to figure out what the right dance is for the city, because you never know what efficiencies you might get.
Sure. I think that's really smart on the team's part.
We did advertise the position, but there's no guarantee that we'll hire someone, so.
That's all I have.
Okay, John.
There is a fun new rule coming down through the state potentially that might impact how we run these meetings. So for subdivisions, there's a new rule that's saying if you do public comments and a public hearing, you have to do 30 days notice before that happens. So there might be an argument about if you're taking public comment, does that count as a public hearing? Like we do, right? We let anyone comment who's there. And if that does, that'll slow down the subdivision process a little bit.
You mean if we allow that, then it's 30 days after that before anything can?
No, it would be, we'd have to do 30-day notice before. So we'd need the whole packet from the applicant 45 days ahead of the hearing.
Wow.
Because we would need to review it, provide
So
some feedback.
the solution really is no longer allow public comments on those items, only at public hearings.
So that's one question is, do you, but anyways, there's a lot of weird stuff coming from the state. So if you just board House Bill or Senate Bill 174 and House Bill 364 are fun reads.
Get right on that.
Yeah, if you're bored. I can throw the yawn. And then the other thing from the planning commission's perspective, I know you've talked about it a little bit, but it'd be good to get some thought and perspective as we move forward. When the public safety building's done, the old building's coming down. And we're gonna need to find something to put there. Right now, me personally, I'm leaning towards parking. I know that's not loved by this group.
Amphitheater.
But if you look at if you look at this site, we are severely underparked right now.
Yeah.
And in fact, when you start coming to planning commission meeting and there's the trades folks working, it's gonna be really, really hard to find a parking spot in this area. So that's one of the
There'll be
issues.
too many people parked out there eating ice cream. and-
Yeah.
John, how hard are they enforcing, say, not me, but a person? You know, a person who would drive the wrong way down this, one way over here.
I'm not aware of a ticket, but I am aware of people being pulled over. So they are doing that. We're evaluating whether that will remain permanent or
Cause
go back
that
to
left
2 ways.
is really hard to make, like, so coming from where right?
Mhm.
Like, it's hard to get here. It's,
Wait,
We used to sneak through the.
where's
back
the one
streets.
way you're talking about?
This
Behind
road
us?
behind us.
Yeah.
I've been driving wrong.
No, I haven't, I just didn't use that road.
So,
so.
Yeah.
It's changed.
So you can't come.
I can get 2600 and it's
One way.
to the left up in those neighborhoods easier because it's not just car, 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 car. You understand what I'm talking about? And then come in here and then I'm stuck. I can't
Turning
get
over
this
there
building.
instead of over there.
And we've been talking
Okay.
about if it does stay, does the one way, basically, do we just turn the area between the senior center parking lot and the library
So-
into another parking lot? So that it's no longer a street, it's a parking
There
lot.
you go.
And that's one concept we've approached.
Are
as
you
well.
open to
it's actually a better.
giving up some of that parking on the front and continuing that extra lane on 2600 past the city?
So that's the other argument for parking where the old building is eventually the road will widen to the south and take out the north part of all those parking stalls.
Oh, Lord.
So if we just do that all at the same time, perfect.
Well, I know a guy who was planning on just driving up to the one way, checking for traffic and then busting in here.
I wish they.
And I don't think he should do it, but I know this guy is.
It would have been great to see you come to planning commission in handcuffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can have an officer posted at 5:45.
What saw a guy today?
Hey,
I
you
mean,
know, there's
you know-
some that are listening in right now. thinking it's
the
sick.
wrong way down the street past the police
It's a
station
blue Silverado.
with yellow speckles. on the side. All right,
Adjourn.
all right. Vote for adjournment. Motion for adjournment. All in favor?
I-
Aye.